The letter wound up with a paragraph asking authority from the prospect to send the order which was requested in the phonograph record. The returns from the second follow-up letter exceeded the returns from the first letter 3 times over. The conditions were practically the same, but in the case of the second letter the sales manager had used his knowledge of human nature. He knew what the first writer did not know, that everybody has decided opinions on the best way to advertise, and by asking their opinions you not only flatter them but they jump at the chance to air their opinions. This is exactly what happened in this case. There are a great many ways where this knowledge of human nature can be brought into play when writing a sales letter. 9/10 of the sales letters which go out fail because the writer does not understand that point. The wording, the phraseology and the grammatical construction of the letter are very important, it is true, but after all the plan is the thing, and it is much better to have a letter with a good plan and poor phraseology than it is to have a letter with no plan and the best grammar in the world. So many letters ramble about and get nowhere. To read them is like watching an 8-ring circus. After you have read them you have no definite impression, just a mass of jumbled words. Make your letters paint a picture. All the words in the dictionary won't sell goods. Only ideas, indelibly impressed on the mind of a reader, will provoke action. Another reason some letters don't pay is that the writer forgets that the person he is writing to is not much interested in what he is writing about. On the contrary, it has been demonstrated that 7 times out of 10, the recipient of a letter, especially if he is a businessman, will read only the opening paragraph, take a flying jump at the middle and then examine the last paragraph to see what it is all about and how much it costs. The most successful sales letters are those which carry a complete selling message in the last paragraph. The practice of spending a lot of time in writing a letter and then enclosing a return card which gives the man the whole proposition in a nutshell without any sales setting is common. It has been found by many tests that when a return card is enclosed with a letter, or with a circular, that most businessmen will read the return card first because they have learned by long experience that they can get the whole proposition in a nutshell from the return card with a good deal less effort and a good deal less reading than they can from the circular itself. It is therefore fatal in planning a sales letter to tell too much in the return card. Some very effective letters have depended upon perfectly blank cards, on which the recipient jotted down his reply in his own way. The mechanics of a good sales letter. When a sales letter is produced on the typewriter, and is a personally dictated letter, it is important that it be planned in such a way as to invite reading rather than repel reading. Many of the most prominent business concerns are very lax in the proper construction and technical arrangement of their business correspondence. Every concern should have a manual of style which can be turned over to a stenographer when she is first employed and which she can follow. Such a manual is the most practical way to build up standards in your correspondence. It not only saves the time of the stenographer, but it is good to fall back upon if some of the older stenographers become careless. Such a manual of style should discuss, first of all, clearness. It should impress upon both the dictator and the stenographer the importance of making a letter clear. That is to say, in using short sentences and paragraphing it properly, also punctuating it correctly so that the meaning will be easily followed. The use of long words should be mentioned particularly. Language which is understood by the highly educated man is not always so easily understood by the man of average education. It is said of Cyrus Curtis of the Curtis Publishing Company that a great deal of his success is due to his ability to edit letters. He is adept at wielding the blue pencil. One of his regular stunts is to take the last paragraph of a letter and put it up front. It is a common fault of inexperienced writers to kill their story with a drawn-out introduction. Businessmen who wouldn't think of going into a prospect's office and opening a sales canvas with funny stories, think nothing at all of starting a letter with some grotesque yarn which they drag into the letter by the seat of the pants. There are even so-called letter experts who insist on beginning every letter they write with some far-fetched introduction which has no bearing at all on the product being sold. Testing chart for letters. Selling qualities of the letter. 1. Is the start effective? Be careful it does not challenge the reader and put him into antagonistic frame of mind. When possible, give it a new start, or embody in it the reason for writing. Don't start off from nowhere. 2. Does it appeal to the reader's self-interest? The motives that make men act are 1. Love, 2. Gain, 3. Pride, 4. Duty, 5. Fear, 6. Self-indulgence. Unless your letter appeals to these motives in an irresistible way, you will not get action. 3. Does it make him want what you are selling? You cannot sell a man something he does not want. If you are selling a chair, make him think how nice it would feel to lounge in a big easy chair and smoke his after-dinner cigar. 4. Does it create confidence? Are you asking him to take your word, a stranger whom he has never even met, that what you say is true? Why not use a testimonial paragraph and let someone else tell about your virtues? What provision have you made in case he is not satisfied? 5. Does it ask for an order? Remember, people are not mind readers. You may know perfectly well why you are writing them and what you want them to do, but do they? Composition of the letter. 1. Does it invite reading? Are paragraphs short and margins wide? Is it free from erasures? Is the signature legible? 2. Is it easy to understand? Break up all involved sentences into several short ones. Use a sentence for each idea. Be careful about pronouns, be sure that the reference is clear in each case. Avoid parenthetical and explanatory clauses. 3. Is the action continuous? Blue pencil all meaningless words and phrases. Get the message you want to convey clearly fixed in your mind and make each step in the letter a step to that end. 4. Does it reflect your personality? Tone down extravagant statements that will give the impression you are a braggart. Let it carry an atmosphere of sincerity and desire to serve. Be watchful for superlatives and the use of the word very. 5. Is it grammatically correct? Have you used was when you should have said were, who in place of whom, differ with instead of differ from, shall instead of will, etc. These experts justify the practice from the standpoint that it gets attention. But if a letter writer has such a poor grasp of the problems of the man he is writing to, as to be unable to contact with him that way, he is not qualified for the work at hand. The American businessman wants no long drawn-out introductions. He wants you to come to the point quickly. Reading his morning's mail is a duty he wants to get over with just as soon as he can and get on with the business of the day. He has no time for jaunts out into fairyland. Too much you is worse than too much we. Nearly all of the articles which have been written on the subject of letter writing lay emphasis on the you idea. They tell the reader that if his letters are to be successful, he must talk to the prospect about his problems, about his troubles and his trials, and he must never for a minute talk about the desires or wishes of the man who is writing the letter or refer even in any way to his business. In fact, you would almost imagine it a sin or crime to use the word we in a letter. It is true that the closer a writer can get to his reader, the better the results are going to be, and it is also true that nothing interests a man so much as himself. The salesman or the sales letter writer who can talk to him about himself is sure to have his interest. On the other hand, however, this you business can be and is being overdone. While the principle behind this idea is perfectly sound, the execution of it is too often abused by writers of sales letters. There is quite a difference between getting a you point of view into a letter and going over a letter and changing the we's to you's as so many writers seem to do. If the letter has a you point of view and is built up from that angle, it doesn't make any difference how many times you use we or how much you say about yourself, because what you do say about yourself will be of interest to the man you are writing to. How can he do business with you until he knows about you? For example, suppose you are selling soap. You are pardonably proud of the fact that your soap is nearly purer, perhaps than any soap sold at the price. You work hard to acquire a reputation as a quality soap maker. You have made many sacrifices in order that your customers should know you as being fair and honorable. If you are guided wholly by instinct, you are inclined to harp on these points in your letters, but the man to whom you are writing doesn't care nearly as much about these things as he does about what your soap will do for him. Let the other fellow shout your praises. The tone of a letter makes or breaks it. The skilled salesman knows this, and consequently strives in his letter to give it an atmosphere of restraint rather than of extravagance. There has been a lot of fun poked at such expressions as "we beg to state, your obedient servant and with your permission." Perhaps these are a bit unnecessary, but they at least serve to give a letter a tone of humility which is pleasing. Nothing influences the tone of a letter more than the fault of shouting your own praises, which so many letter writers seem to feel is necessary. In order to do this, they overindulge in superlatives and make a lot of statements which may be perfectly true but which strengthen the doubts of a skeptical prospect. A master letter writer always tones statements down to a point where they will be accepted on their face, even if he has to understate the truth. He seldom, if ever, indulges in superlatives. Particularly is he careful not to overuse the word very. The letters of both Lincoln and Franklin, while not sales letters, are noteworthy for their tone of sincerity and deference to the opinion of others. Commenting on humility as a factor in dealing with men, Benjamin Franklin says in his autobiography, "I cannot boast of much success in acquiring the reality of this virtue, but I have learned a good deal with regard to the appearance of it. I made it a rule to forbear all direct contradiction to the sentiments of others, and all positive assertions of my own. I even forbid myself, agreeably to the old laws of Junto, the use of every word or expression in the language that imported a fixed opinion such as certainly, undoubtedly, etc., and I have adopted instead of them, I conceive, I apprehend, or I imagine a thing to be so and so, or it appears to me at present to be so and so." When another asserted something that I thought an error, I denied myself the pleasure of contradicting him abruptly, and in answering I began by observing that in certain cases or circumstances his opinion would be right, but there seemed to me to be some difference. The modest way in which I proposed my opinions procured for them a readier reception. There is a great deal of truth in Franklin's assertion, and in our letters to our customers and to our prospects we are wise if we avoid making assertions which challenge credulity, or in any way make it appear that we are trying to exaggerate the virtues of what we are selling. If the virtues of our products must be expounded, let it be done by means of enclosures. Quite often we get letters from our customers which can be marked up in such a way that the heart of them is quickly found, and these letters can be used to bring out a point we want to get over. Ask for the order. You have probably had experience with the very friendly and agreeable young salesman who dropped in on you every day and talked about the weather and everything else under the sun, but who never gets to the point of telling you what he wants or what he wants you to do. These salesmen are good friend makers, but usually poor order getters. The same thing holds true of writers of sales letters. There are many who can write a very human and interesting sales letter which will be read by the people to whom it is sent, but it fails to get the business. It brings back many favorable replies but comparatively few orders. The trouble is the same in both instances. The salesman doesn't get the order because he doesn't ask for it, and the man who writes the letter doesn't get what he is after because he doesn't come out clearly in his letter and tell the prospect what he wants him to do. No sales letter should be allowed to go out unless it ends up by telling the recipient just exactly what action you want him to take, and make it as easy as possible for him to take that action. This does not mean that some hackneyed expression such as "do it now" or "send back the card today" is all that is needed. Neither does it mean that the letter should conclude with some domineering, arbitrary demand that the prospect do certain things without giving him any reason at all for doing them. But it does mean that a properly constructed sales letter will lead the prospect through the stages of attention, interest, desire, and conviction up to the final stage of action. If the presentation is allowed to stop before the action stage is reached, all the work which has been done will have been in vain. So, be sure in your letters that in the last paragraph, or at least in the last few paragraphs, you make it clear that you are writing to the person for a definite purpose, and the reason why it is to his advantage to do what you want him to do. Then tell him what you want him to do so as to start the ball rolling. If you want him to sign an order, ask him to sign an order. If you want him to send back a reply card, ask him to send back a reply card. A spare time business became the world's largest mail order house. Richard W. Sears, founder of Sears, Roebuck and Company, made his first $1,000 in 1884, in a spare time mail order business under the name of the R.W. Sears Watch Company. He wrote his letters with pen and ink in his leisure hours. Later, when his correspondence demanded more time than he could spare, he enlisted the aid of a railroad man working on a nearby section. From this humble start grew the greatest mail order house in the world. Soon Mr. Sears' spare time work became so profitable that he resigned his position as telegraph operator, moved to Minneapolis, and started in the mail order business in real earnest with $8,000 which he had managed to save. In the late 80s he moved to Chicago. He continued to prosper. Then a Chicago firm made him an attractive offer for his business, which he accepted. A condition of the sale was that Mr. Sears should not engage in the mail order business in Chicago for a period of 5 years. When the transfer was completed, Mr. Sears returned to Minneapolis. At this point the level-headedness of the man is shown in a striking manner. He was not yet 24, yet he had over $100,000 in the bank, made entirely by his own efforts in the mail order business. The possession of such a large sum of money by so young a man is often a signal for erratic actions. But it affected Mr. Sears not a particle. His first step was to buy his mother a home. Then he invested the major part of his capital in Minnesota 8% farm mortgages. He never parted with this investment. He started again in the mail order business in Minneapolis. At this time, Mr. Roebuck worked for him as repairman. They later formed a partnership and the new business grew by leaps and bounds. The advantages of Chicago as a distributing center appealed strongly to Mr. Sears. So at the end of the specified 5 years, he moved again from Minneapolis to Chicago. This was in 1895. Mr. Roebuck stayed with Mr. Sears about 4 more years. Mr. Sears was a prodigious worker. He would work 18 hours a day for weeks at a stretch. In the early days he originated all the ideas and plans used in the business, and wrote his own copy. Once on the trail of an idea, he would forget all about time and would stick until it was developed, or at least in condition to turn over to an assistant. Mrs. Sears often complained good-naturedly about this devotion to business. When he left home in the morning she never knew just when he would return. Sometimes she would hear from him at his office in the early morning hours, other times the following day from one of his factories several hundred miles from Chicago, or from a train bound for New York. He never let up until the thing in hand was completed, even though it took him to distant parts of the country. When building an advertisement or a catalog, thoughts of economy never entered Mr. Sears' mind. The main idea was to get it right. He was never really satisfied with his work and would take an advertisement or a catalog page which had just been printed, look it over carefully and suggest changes that would give the copy the right appeal or appearance. He would order pages that had been already set in type set up all over again. The first advertisements were his famous Send No Money series. When they appeared, the advertising world stood aghast. These advertisements violated every principle of good advertising. They were small-sized, closely set in fine type, full of detailed description, hard to read, and without headings. They began Send No Money. Cut this advertisement out, return to us, and we will send you. Nobody believed people would read such small type. But Mr. Sears felt that if the subject matter was interesting, people would not want to miss a single word. And he won his case. Anywhere from 5 to 20 advertisements of this type appeared in each issue of a big list of publications, with from 20 to 30 million of circulation in the aggregate. Bills for advertising ran from $50,000 to $60,000 a month, and the campaign distributed millions of dollars worth of merchandising. At the same time, he was building up his immense catalog mailing list. During the 1907 panic, Mr. Sears showed his real mettle. Sales had dropped off on account of money being tight. However, he reasoned that people still wanted things even though they had no ready cash to buy them or feared to spend what money they did have. In order to overcome this attitude, Mr. Sears wrote on a slip of paper the following: "If you haven't the ready money to send us with your orders, send us anything that looks like money. Your personal check or your clearinghouse certificate will do, and will be accepted as cash." This advertisement was broadcast through the entire country. Millions of these slips of paper were printed and mailed each week. With every letter or package sent to a customer, one of these slips was enclosed. The entire plan was startling, to say the least. When others were retrenching, Mr. Sears boosted, and the result was such a flood of orders, resources of the company were taxed to the limit. By doing the unusual, Mr. Sears reaped unusual results. Because he believed that merchandise should be thoroughly described in the advertisement, Mr. Sears went the limit on description. He wanted to be certain that the prospective buyer would know from the advertising just what he would receive for his money. In an advertisement for suits, for example, he would even go so far as to describe the linings of the coats and the buttons, even the buttonholes were mentioned. One of his policies was that merchandise must be guaranteed. It was his contention that the customer was always right, and no matter what it might cost to satisfy a customer, that satisfaction had to be made. When a customer complained that the merchandise he received was not right, he was told to return the goods, even if he had used them, and his money would be refunded. There was never any backing out on this position. The money was instantly returned without question. He insisted that his goods must always be as represented, and he backed up this policy by offering to send goods COD. Mr. Sears was probably the first merchant to send his goods subject to approval, with transportation charges guaranteed both ways. He was always willing to take every risk himself. The customer had to be protected by every safeguard. Another policy which probably originated with Mr. Sears was that of placing emphasis on the personal element in all his advertising. Letters were always phrased in a personal tone, and every letter was signed by his name rather than by the name of the company. He wanted every customer to feel that he was dealing with a flesh and blood person rather than an institution. He addressed customers in their own language, in a simple, neighborly way that they could easily understand. Each letter breathed honesty and sincerity, and a genuine desire to serve. He knew that country people were not used to writing and found it difficult to express themselves easily. He also knew that the mental inertia of people, generally, prevented them from sending for goods. He had to get these people, who did so little writing, to send him an order. To overcome all these obstacles, he originated the do this style of advertising. Advertisements read: "If you want this catalog, simply write us a letter or a postal, and say send me your big catalog, and it will go to you by return mail, postpaid." He also knew that there was usually a scarcity of writing material in the average country home, so he would say in his advertisement, "Write to us in your way, in any language, we will understand and will fill your order correctly. If you haven't an order blank handy, use any plain paper, use pencil or pen, it makes no difference. Don't be afraid of making a mistake. We will take all the risk and will return your money immediately, including whatever you paid for freight or express charges, if the goods are not perfectly satisfactory." Mr. Sears believed that after a man had accumulated a fortune in business, he had earned the right to retire. With this idea in mind, he began early in his business career to build up an organization which would be able someday to carry on without his guidance and management. It was in 1908 that he withdrew from the active management of the business. He died in 1914. A one-man business with 1 million customers. Back in the 1890s, the sight of a young man driving his horse and buggy along the lonely country roads became a familiar one to the farmers of southwestern Iowa. His name was Henry Field, and on the buggy seat beside him rested a basket of seed packets which he sold from farm to farm in the country and from house to house in the small towns and villages. He had planted, raised and prepared that seed in his own garden. He had even printed his own seed packets, and after he had filled them he went out himself to sell them. His was strictly a one-man business. There weren't any large towns down in southwestern Iowa in those days. There weren't any surfaced roads, and sometimes there weren't any roads at all. He had to cut across fields to reach some of the farmers who bought his seed. But whether the temperature was 110 in the shade or down below zero, whether the roads were heavy with dust or hub-deep with mud, Henry Field was on the job. He brought more than seed to the isolated farms he called on. He brought helpful suggestions about planting, news about what other farmers were doing, information about the need for good seed and getting good crops. But most of all he brought friendliness and encouragement. The farmers and their families got to know him and to like him. They looked forward with eagerness to his visits. They talked about him with their neighbors. Before long these customers wanted to buy more of Henry Field's seed than he alone could raise and deliver. He thought he was well enough acquainted with his customers to get their orders by mail just as well as in person. That would permit him to devote his full time to producing and shipping the seed. So he got hold of some second-hand printing equipment in Shenandoah, Iowa, printed a modest catalog, and started a mail-order business. Bringing the curiosities and delicacies of faraway countries to the American home offers a most fascinating and profitable business. The expansion of the parcel post has opened new opportunities for the mail salesman. The knack of appealing to farmers. Through years of personal dealings with them, he knew how to appeal to farmers as successfully by the written word as by the spoken word. First of all, he must make his story brief and to the point. As he himself once expressed it, when you're driving along the road on a freezing day and meet a farmer taking a load of corn to market, you can't make him stop and shiver all day while you're talking to him. You have to tell him your business in just as few words as you can, get his order, and let him go on to town. Well, it's the same way when you write him a letter or send him a catalog. You've got to get down to cases right away. That doesn't mean, though, that Henry Field's letters and catalogs didn't radiate the same friendliness and intimacy which had made him so successful as a salesman. He didn't make the mistake of writing in a literary or bookish way. He simply wrote the same way he would talk to a man if he met him face to face. He used the common, everyday colloquial expressions his customers used. He treated them as though they were his next-door neighbors. He even gossiped a little, but was careful not to be long-winded about it. From the start, people liked his way of doing business. They got in the habit of sending in their orders by mail, and it wasn't long until orders began coming in from people he had never called on in person, from Nebraska, Missouri, and Kansas. Year by year his catalogs grew larger and larger, but he continued to write them in the first person and he never deviated from the friendly, personal, informal style which established his early success. Today the Henry Field Company in Shenandoah, Iowa, has over 1 million customers on its books. Its volume of business has grown from a few $100s a year to $3 million. In addition to selling seeds and plants, Henry Field has branched out into the general merchandise field. He sells overalls, shoes, hats, prunes, oranges, tires and an endless variety of other products. In order to sell them successfully by mail, he developed many innovations in the established mail order practices. Finding it unprofitable to sell a single pair of overalls, for example, he sells them in units of 3. Since farmers buy potatoes, apples and corn by the bushel, he thought they'd also buy oranges by the bushel, so that's the way he sells them. Coffee is packaged in 3, 5, 10 and 25-pound containers. Canned goods are offered only in units of 12. Although stores sell prunes in 1, 3 and 5-pound packages, Henry Field sells them only in 20 and 25-pound units. Using the radio to create consumer acceptances. 10 years ago he bought a rundown radio broadcasting station in Shenandoah, rehabilitated it, and has used it ever since to sell even more goods by radio than he ever sold strictly by mail. He is now known as a radio order merchant as well as a mail order merchant. He does most of his own broadcasting, and where once he called personally on hundreds of customers, then wrote letters and sent catalogs to thousands, now his voice is heard by literally millions throughout the whole Middle West. In the 25 years from 1899 to 1924 his mail order sales grew to a $600,000 annual volume. Since he has been able to get closer than ever to his customers over the air, they have grown to $3 million. But in spite of the huge plant which his business occupies, in spite of the acres of fields where his seeds, plants and bulbs are now grown, in spite of his broadcasting station and the huge department store which covers the ground floor of the building, all the million customers on the books of the company still feel that they are dealing directly with Henry Field. They may never have seen him in person, although each year close to 500,000 farmers and small townspeople visit his plant, but through his letters and broadcasts and catalogs they feel that he is an old and trusted friend. That's why they continue sending in their orders by mail at a rate of 1,000 every day. Chapter 10. Selling your services. The first thing to do is to take an inventory of yourself. What do you like to do? What can you do especially well? What can you do skillfully that most people do indifferently? What need exists which you could fill? These are just a few of the searching questions which you should ask yourself before attempting to sell your services. If you can find the right answers to these questions, you will have little difficulty in establishing yourself in a personal service business. Now there is a difference between selling your services and getting a job. In one case you are what is called an entrepreneur, while in the other case you are an employee. Just what is an entrepreneur? He is a man who takes the risks that go with a business venture, and profits or loses in proportion to those risks. He derives his income from customers or clients, as the case may be, rather than from an employer. The entrepreneur may be, and usually does become, an employer. But he still assumes the risks and the possibilities for profit that go with them. It is from the entrepreneur class that most of our successful businessmen, merchants and manufacturers come. They usually got their start selling their own services. Then, as they acquired skill and knowledge, they branched out and sold the services of others on whom they in turn made a profit. It is an axiom of success that to receive the applause of the multitude you must find out what your public wants and then do it better than anyone else in the world is doing it. The foregoing applies particularly to artists, those whose services take the form of entertaining or educating people. But it also applies to less colorful work. To achieve success in any human activity, you must excel others. When you have done that, your reputation will be made and your success will be assured. The thing which you select to do need not be, in fact it should not be, a broad activity. The more you concentrate your interest, the more quickly you will succeed. In Chicago there is an advertising man who discovered 20 years ago that very few men knew how to write inspirational letters to salesmen. He further discovered that there was a need for interesting, practical, informative letters which would actually help salesmen to successfully meet the difficult problems they daily encountered. So he quit his job and offered his services to sales managers of companies which employed salesmen. In some cases these sales managers could have written just as good, perhaps better, letters than this advertising man offered to write for them, but they did not have time to do it. They were too engrossed in the activities of their jobs. So they were glad to pay the young advertising man $10 a month to write a weekly letter to their salesman. Since salesmen's problems have much in common, the young man found that the same letter, with a few changes, would work equally well for any business, and within the year he was receiving $10 a month from more than 200 companies for his services. At the age of 27 he was earning over $20,000 a year. Yet, had he been employed by any one of these companies on a salary, he could not have made more than $7,000 at the most. What was the secret of his success? It was simple. He became expert at doing one thing better than any other person in the world was doing it. If he had set out to be a better advertising man than anyone else in the world, he would still be on the way up the ladder. But he lifted out of the selling field one little thing, a service for which a need existed, and then he concentrated all his efforts and thought on doing that one thing superlatively well. In other words, he was a specialist. This principle of specialization is most important in our modern complex life. It applies not only to business, but to whatever we do. To be able to do many things well is an asset and a credit. And perhaps the world needs more versatile people. But when it comes to making $1,000 quickly by selling your services, specialize. We are living in an age of specialists. Doctors specialize because they know that the big opportunities in medicine go to the one who thoroughly masters one particular disease or concentrates on one certain part of the body. The general practitioner served a very useful role in our community life. It is too bad to see him pass. But the big money in medicine lies in specializing. The same is true in law and in educational activities. It is true in engineering. People will pay a premium to get the advice or the opinion of those who are recognized as knowing more about the particular thing in which they are interested than anyone else in town, or in the country or in the world. Training gave Chapin a start. Getting the first 1,000 didn't worry Howard Chapin so much as preparing himself to get it. When he left high school, he considered technical courses offered by various schools, and decided to go in for mechanical engineering. He didn't have enough money to matriculate at a university, so he decided to do the next best thing, get a job, and take a correspondence course. That was 5 years ago. Today, Chapin is operating a successful engineering service of his own. It's small, but his profits for the past year have been a few times $1,000. When I decided to study engineering, I went to the office of an engineering company here in Chicago, and explained that I wanted more than anything else, an opportunity to get an education. I agreed to work for a small salary. I would be satisfied, I told them, if it would barely cover the cost of my correspondence course. The manager thought I had the right idea. That's how I got started myself, he admitted, and arranged to take me into his office. Supplementing the correspondence work was class instruction, which didn't interfere with my hours at the engineering company. With the practical suggestions I picked up in the office, plus the practice work and theory studied in class, I soon saw that I was getting somewhere. It took me 2 years to complete my correspondence studies. Meanwhile, I was advanced to a better position, and a raise in salary. I saved every cent of this raise, having accustomed myself to living economically during the period of my school work. Something went wrong with a big job my employers were handling during my 3rd year with them, and they were forced out of business. Without a job, I analyzed my future. I had saved $190 and I was qualified to do specialized work. I wrote out a list of the places that had use for such work and called on them. I found many small factories where motors were being neglected because it didn't pay to keep a full-time electrician. This looked like a good opportunity to me, and I began contracting to keep such equipment in good condition and service it monthly on a yearly contract. I called upon factories, laundries and such places where there are motor-driven shafts and machines, and charged a service fee ranging from $5 to $50 a month, depending upon the amount of work. I agreed to furnish labor for repairing and installing equipment, and for maintaining it on this basis. In 4 days I had contracts from 7 concerns, totaling $104 a month. I did the work myself and it kept me going 17 hours a day for almost a month. Those motors certainly were in bad condition. After that, it was easier, and since there were now only a few days' work to be done each month, I called on a number of other firms, and signed up 5 contracts totaling $120. Again I found that the equipment had been sadly neglected for a good many months, and that I had to work my head off. I was now assured of an income of $224 a month for a year. However, as I still had some idle time on my hands, I sallied forth for another batch of customers. At the end of 4 months, I had signed up 21 companies on contracts totaling $885 a month. This was too much work for me to do alone, so I hired 2 good electricians, paid them the full union wage, supervised their work, and got more contracts. Profits quickly mounted. In less than a year, my contracts were paying me a profit of $490 a month, and I was paying full regular union wages to 5 good men. Chapin offers a service much needed in every manufacturing community. Men trained and skilled as mechanics might do well to follow his example and offer a similar service to small manufacturers at a regular, reasonable monthly fee. They certainly will be welcomed by the smaller manufacturer who is at present worried about costs, and who may be permitting machinery to operate without making necessary repairs because of the excessive charges often made for this type of work. A flower a day service. Gurney Chrysler, an alert young New York advertising woman, had a suspicion that florists could get more business if they went after it, instead of waiting for it to come to them. So she rented a loft in an old building and sent out announcements advertising a flower a day or bouquet a week service. For 1 flower a day she charged 10 cents, and for 2 flowers a day, 15 cents. Those who wished this service contracted to pay her by the week or month. Within a short time she had 1,000 customers. Miss Chrysler's work begins at 4:30 each morning. At this time she goes to market, buys her flowers and starts her helpers making the boutonnieres. By 8 o'clock, messenger boys start to deliver the packages. You may have your order varied any way you like: a rose on Monday, a carnation on Tuesday, a gardenia on Wednesday, a tulip on Thursday, and so on through the week. You may also have flowers sent daily to a friend in the hospital or to one who is convalescing at home. You may give Miss Chrysler a list of anniversaries in your family and flowers will be delivered automatically on those exact dates. The bill, of course, will be sent to you once a month according to contract. In addition to the flower a day idea, she prepares special table decorations for parties and arranges floral decorations for weddings, teas, bridal showers, coming out parties, and other social functions. Margaret Harper, of Cleveland, Ohio, had somewhat the same idea but depended upon her own garden for her flowers. For years she had been an enthusiastic gardener, and the grounds about her old home bloomed with flowers of many varieties from spring through the early autumn. This was the one subject in which she was most interested and enthusiastic. Her beautiful arrangements of cut flowers within her home brought as many compliments as her garden did. Having the time, the flowers and the artistic ability to arrange them, all she needed was a list of customers. She knew nothing about advertising, but a friend who owned a letter shop prepared some clever little folders for her at cost, and she addressed the envelopes on her son's portable typewriter. The list was made up of names of friends and acquaintances she knew who were in business, all the professional people she knew such as her banker, lawyer, dentist, the principal of her son's school, some of the teachers of the school, the owners of several hotel apartment buildings near her section of town, the heads of small business firms within walking distance, and the managers of 2 tea rooms and a restaurant a few blocks away. Many of these announcements were followed by personal calls, and with practically every call she sold the idea to the prospective customer. Her 2 young sons delivered the flowers each morning, and once a month Mrs. Harper collected the money for them. This personal contact with her customers gave her a chance to handle any complaints and also the opportunity to sell her customers on other uses for her flowers. Through subtle suggestion, she secured many orders for table decorations, decorations for parties, weddings, bridal showers, new baby baskets, and holiday festivities. During the winter, she bought her flowers from the flower market and continued the service to her customers at a slightly higher cost. 2 young New Yorkers also found the establishment of a flower service a way out of their difficulties. They had been wearily trudging from employment office to employment office looking for jobs until one day they realized that the only way to get a job was to make one. They pooled their resources, which amounted to the grand sum of $1.50, and started in business. With their capital they purchased 1,000 business cards and distributed them on foot from office to office, hotel to hotel, restaurant to restaurant. A little sales talk went with the distribution of each card. Today, they have built up a nice little business. Having no capital left to buy the flowers would have made things difficult for them if a wholesale florist had not agreed to wait until the 10th of the month following their purchases to bill them. This arrangement gave them time to collect their money before the bills fell due. Since they have access to the wholesaler's stock at all times, there is no need for them to invest in stock of their own. The flowers are sold on a monthly fee basis and the bouquets are changed every 3rd day. The fee depends, of course, upon the number of bouquets furnished. Rug washing is a quick profit business. Edward Anderson washed his first $1,000 out of other people's carpets. And he surprised himself at the ease with which he accumulated the money. He started in this unique way of earning a living when he lost his job as a manager of a department store in Central Ohio, where a carpet washing machine, specially made to wash carpets and rugs, was used in the store. I wrote the manufacturer of this machine and learned I could buy one on the easy payment plan, said Anderson. So I hustled around the neighborhood and got a few orders for cleaning rugs without removing them from the floor at $1.50 a rug. Then I mailed my initial payment to the manufacturer. Full instructions for operating came with the machine. When I started on the jobs ordered, though, I was surprised that I could clean rugs in about 1/3 the time I had figured. During one morning I cleaned 7 rugs and pocketed $10.50. That afternoon I went around the neighborhood looking for more rug cleaning orders. I secured my first orders without any trouble. I experienced some difficulty getting more, however. Most housewives thought I might ruin an expensive rug, or wouldn't efficiently clean carpets for the price I quoted. One woman said, "I can't see how you can do it so cheap, if you do a good job." I explained the way the machine operated in vain. She wouldn't believe it. Others said they didn't want their rugs cleaned, and then quizzed me about the kind of work I was doing. I asked each of these women to call up the people whose rugs I cleaned that morning, but they wouldn't bother. Going home, I listed the number of office buildings, offices, hotels, and apartment buildings in town. I called upon the managers of those places the following days but got only $30 worth of work during the balance of that week. This wasn't bad. The second week, however, was a disappointment and I wondered how I would ever get enough business to pay for the machine. I began to make desperate efforts. I argued and pleaded for orders, but it seemed that I always called just after rugs had been cleaned. One day it occurred to me that if people did not need rug cleaning at the moment I called, they might need it later, so I had some cards printed explaining the kind of service I was offering. These didn't bring me any immediate orders, however, and the time for the first payment on the machine was drawing near. I called back upon my first customers then, and asked them if they could send me to some friends. One woman said that she would see some of her friends the next day, and let me know. 2 days later, she phoned that a friend on the other side of town wanted her rug cleaned, and promised if I did as good as claimed, to get me additional business. I lost no time getting over to do the job, and was rewarded with 3 additional orders. Then I wrote the manufacturer and asked if there were a better way to get business than I was using. The company sent me a good deal of solid instruction in salesmanship, which I carefully digested. I found that my method of getting the business was too high pressure. I was antagonistic when people didn't agree with me. I changed these tactics, and the difference in my reception was amazing. In 2 months, I was becoming known for my pleasant manner and uniform good nature. One woman said she didn't really need the work done right then, but because I was so polite, she couldn't turn me down. Politeness also smoothed a path for me in approaching the managers of office buildings and hotels. One hotel manager with whom I quarreled the first time I called on him, gave me a job cleaning the carpets in the corridors of the hotel. This work brought me $93, and took 13 hours to complete. I didn't get that order on the 2nd, or the 5th call, however. But I was as polite and courteous as I could be each time I called back on him. I had learned my lesson. In one office building, after many calls upon the manager, I was able to get orders from tenants totaling $107, besides $12 worth of work from the building owners. Anderson's experience has convinced him that the value of courtesy and politeness in sales work cannot be overemphasized. He charges $1.50 for cleaning a 9x12 rug, and does the job in 12 minutes. Daily profits average about $16. The machine operates from a light socket with electric current, on the rotary brush principle, and is fully guaranteed to do satisfactory work by the manufacturer. This machine washes the carpet with soap and water, which are fed into the brushes by a patented process. However, it is impossible for the machine to spill water or soap upon the floor, or injure the rugs in any way. Anderson's total investment, which included the price of the machine, was $317. Starting a package delivery system. 2 years ago, James Overhaus took his last $100, bought a second-hand truck for 35 of them and spent several dollars fixing it up. He had a sign painted, and announced to the world that he was in the expressing and moving business. But nothing happened. He sat around the front room of his flat for several days, but no one seemed to want to express anything or move things about the city of Chicago. He then went out to stores, and sought odd jobs delivering heavy boxes to warehouses and picking up loads to be brought back to the stores. In this way, he managed to eke out a bare existence, but he thought he was progressing. A chain store manager stopped him on the street one day, asked how business was with him, and said if Jimmy wanted to take over the delivery of groceries for the store, he could pick up a few dollars a day from making store deliveries. This was his start. Today he has 7 new delivery wagons operating on the south side of Chicago, and more on the way. When that A&P store manager asked me to make deliveries of groceries for his customers, he explained that the store was a cash and carry store, and did not make deliveries, said Jimmy, and then he pointed out that the fellow who was making deliveries up to that time, gave poor service. There are a few dollars a day in it if you give service, the manager told me. I thanked him. A charge of 10 cents for each box delivered was added to the store customer's bill, and collected at the time the groceries were paid for. All I had to do was stop at the store, put the deliveries on the truck, and deliver them. But there weren't many boxes every day. That one store hardly paid for the gasoline. I lined up another chain store, 2 independent grocers and 3 butchers, however, and made the rounds of each, loaded up the truck and delivered. At the end of each day, the store managers or owners paid me the amount they had collected, and I was able to carry on. The most important thing about this type of service was to make frequent deliveries. Food is wanted quickly. I make 4 trips to the stores, 1 at 10, 1 at 11:30, 1 at 2 and 1 at 4. I pick up all the boxes and packages of meat and groceries for delivery that are ready, and carry them around. It takes about an hour to make all the deliveries, so that those who buy at any of the stores on this route, have their groceries early enough to start supper. When store customers discovered they could depend upon my service, more of them had things delivered. Women hate to carry heavy parcels. Potatoes weigh 15 pounds to the peck, and no woman wants to carry a peck of potatoes herself. She is glad to have the potatoes and her other groceries carried for her, and willing to pay a dime for it. In a month, my business had increased from 40 packages daily from that one neighborhood to 129. In 2 months, I was averaging 150 deliveries a day, and that was about the top. I arranged with stores in other communities, got a helper and another second-hand truck. Soon that was booming also. There isn't a small or large town where a good delivery service from stores is not welcome. Most store people have either discontinued making deliveries, or would be willing to discontinue delivering, if there were a local, dependable service such as Overhaus offers. Furnishing this type of service is a quick way to get started in a business. Sewing for the hard-to-fit woman. One day a Chicago seamstress overheard an extremely stout woman telling a small shopkeeper that she experienced so much difficulty in finding suitable clothes in the stores that she had just about given up bothering about her appearance. With an apology, the dressmaker entered the conversation and made an appointment with the stout woman for a fitting. The stout woman had a sister of about the same build and she too became a customer. Both of them knew friends who found difficulty in getting suitable apparel because of their size, and soon the dressmaker had built up a nice little business. Being an ingenious person, this dressmaker sold her customers on having their lingerie as well as their dresses made to order. She also encouraged them to plan their needs for each season in advance, thus showing them how to be well dressed with a minimum of expense and time. This plan not only helped her to organize her work, but also gave her extra work to do in fixing over last season's dresses for her customers. She realized that unless she had ideas to offer her customers, she would not be able to plan their wardrobes, and she knew that was the secret of success in this business. So she scanned the pattern books, looked at the new fabrics in the better department stores, and also looked over the dresses sold by the stylish stout departments in these stores. She brought samples of fabrics home from the stores and mounted them on cards with the prices listed beneath. Pictures of dresses made from patterns that she thought would make up well for stout figures were also mounted on cards. Customers came to rely more and more on her judgment as to style and good taste, which, of course, made the work much easier for her to handle. While most of this dressmaker's work came to her through customers' recommendations, some of it also came through a corseteer who had a number of stout women on her customer list. An agreement was made between the two women to recommend each other to their customers, a plan that worked to their mutual benefit. Recently, she found another market making clothes for unusually tall women. These women, like stout women, find it hard to be fitted in ready-made things, and to make it more difficult, there are no special departments in the stores which cater to their needs. Tall women need longer sleeves, longer skirts, and often longer waists than the average figure requires, so practically everything they buy has to be altered. This business was a little harder to build up, but it is slowly increasing, mostly through word-of-mouth advertising by satisfied customers. An airplane junkyard. Arrigo Balbone, a young California pilot, finds little competition in his line of business, which is salvaging wrecked airplanes. His market for parts of wrecked planes includes movie directors who can use battered planes in filming crashes, owners of obsolete engines who need repair parts, aviation schools, amateur plane and glider builders, inventors and souvenir hunters. The idea for his airplane junkyard, just outside of Los Angeles, was the result of an airplane crash. On a flight one day from San Francisco to Santa Monica, he crashed just north of Los Angeles. He escaped serious injury, but his plane was completely wrecked. With it went his savings, which had been invested in the plane. He later salvaged what he could of the plane and sold the parts to aviators. By selling his wrecked plane in this way, he got together $930. It was then that he realized that an airplane junkyard might be a profitable business. And so it turned out to be. It was not long before he was known far and wide as a source of supply for airplane parts, and orders began coming from foreign countries as well as the United States. Aviation schools abroad use the old engines salvaged from the ships to teach the students the mechanics of flying. Inventors buy them and tear them down, hoping to find a better way of building engines. The instruments and mechanical devices are also used for this purpose. In order to keep his supply complete, Mr. Balboni is on the alert for news of airplane crashes. Instantly, he takes steps to salvage the parts and buys them direct from the pilot or others interested. A business in organizing archery clubs. In 1929, J. M. Deeds was a businessman in the Northwest with 70 people on his payroll. In 1931, he was a common laborer in Oakland, California. Digging ditches was arduous labor for an aging man in poor health, but when one has a wife and children. The following year Mr. Deeds, without work or money, told a minister, "I'll either have to take up a hobby or go crazy." The minister replied, "Good idea, the hobby I mean." Mr. Deeds chose archery because his son and daughter were scouts, and because half a century ago, as a small boy in the wilds of Northern California, he had been taught by the Indians how to make bows and arrows from the native woods and how to shoot. By autumn 1932, he had become a committee man for the Scouts and had converted 60% of the members over to the idea of archery as a project. The following spring saw his interest so intense that he had committed himself to the pastime as a life work, with the goal of making the East Bay District the archery center of America. That summer, while conducting a scout expedition, he came across some exceedingly tough grass which he thought had target possibilities. He mailed a sample to the Department of Agriculture, at Washington, and learned that it was the toughest grass in the United States. The owner of the property on which it grew gave Mr. Deeds permission to take all he wanted. He said it was called wild lime grass and was useless for hay. Mr. Deeds made a trial target and found it more practical than any he had ever used. He cut and hauled away a ton of the grass and in his spare time made targets. These he traded to tackle makers for raw material, which he made into tackle, bows and arrows. In the meantime, he had organized a club called Berkeley Archers and was known as its guiding genius. There were 60 members, teachers and the tired businessman element of the East Bay, also a junior section of 30 boys and girls. In addition, there were 15 men calling themselves the Rovers, whom he was training for big game hunting. When the federal emergency educational program provided for recreational activities, Mr. Deeds visited the directors but was turned down. They considered archery unsafe. He kept on visiting them until they agreed to experiment if he could furnish tackle for the class. He could. Hadn't he been fashioning dozens of bows and hundreds of arrows for just such a contingency? 500 enrolled during the next 6 months, and in 2,000 student hours not one accident has occurred. Of the group, 70 have joined archery clubs, many securing their tackle from Mr. Deeds. He learned how to make tackle by trial and error and by winning the friendship of expert bow makers, one an Indian chief who winters in California, and the other a leading craftsman of the West. Today Mr. Deeds' bows combine beauty with sturdiness, and a 15-pound practice bow of his devising has proved far better for the novice than the customary 25 or 30-pound bow. Mr. Deeds attributes his enviable reputation as a teacher to the fact that he takes the mystery out of archery and puts it on a purely mechanical basis. It is his constant delight to see stooping, pallid men, women and children transformed into healthy individuals with sparkling eyes and erect carriage. His hobby has meant the support of his family and the accumulation of tackle worth $1,000. But, best of all, it has meant his personal rehabilitation. Ghostwriting is a business. Back in February 1933, when Fred E. Bear, of New York City, realized his publicity business was dying on its feet, he let it expire and he and Henry F. Woods organized the Ghostwriters Bureau. What does a Ghostwriters Bureau do? Well, if you are called upon to say something or to write a paper for your association, you get in touch with the Bureau and presto. Your speech or paper is all prepared for you. Professional and business people use the service. Many general agents of insurance companies who must prepare inspirational material for salesmen make constant use of the Bureau's services. When the Bureau was first organized, the charges for the service ranged from 4 to 11 cents a word. This was too high, but it was some time before the owners realized it. The charge now is 1 1/2 to 6 cents. Part of the amount charged goes to the writer, the rest is the Bureau's compensation. There are now 117 writing specialists on the staff, specialists in science, architecture, finance, engineering, merchandising, and several other fields. About 1,200 calls for help on speeches, books, articles, and reports come through the Bureau in a year. As people don't like to admit they employ specialists to do their writing for them, there is little chance of word-of-mouth advertising. Consequently, the Bureau has been advertised almost every week from the start through a 1-inch advertisement in the New York newspapers. A bureau of this sort could be organized by any alert young businessman or woman with an idea of the needs in his particular community. People active in trade associations, professional clubs, social clubs, women's clubs, literary clubs, scientific organizations all need the help of a trained writer in the preparation of manuscripts for publication or the preparation of speeches. The backbone of an organization, such as this, is a good staff of associates who are experts in their particular fields. There are any number of able writers who would welcome the chance to make a few extra dollars in their spare time. Snapshots pay vacation bills. Years ago, Robert E. Hughes, a teacher of physics at the high school in Evanston, Illinois, started taking pictures with a little, inexpensive brownie. As time went on, he became more and more interested in his hobby and invested in a better camera. During his long summer vacations, he carried his camera with him. One day after he had developed some pictures taken around a boys' camp, he showed them to the camp director. As a result, he got orders for 200 pictures. From that time on, he paid for his vacations with the sale of snapshots. Summer hotels, camps, railroads, tourist agencies, inns, dude ranches, clubs, all offer to market. He makes the pictures sell themselves. He figures, and rightly, that if he asks if pictures are wanted, the response will be negative. Mr. Hughes has found some unusual outlets for snapshots. During one vacation spent in the West and Southwest, he made pictures to order for a lecturer and then developed them for colored slides. Another time he was commissioned by a travel agency to shoot some pictures in Wisconsin. Out of this commission he grossed $2,500. From time to time he has prepared illustrations for advertising booklets. A furnace company not long ago had him shoot pictures of registers in floors and ceilings at unusual angles. There is considerable fun to be had out of this hobby also. One picture he enjoyed doing was for a fisherman who had caught an average-sized fish. He made a picture of the fisherman holding the fish. Then Mr. Hughes was instructed to blow up the fish, only that is, to make the fish so large it would literally drag on the ground. At the same time, the figure of the fisherman was to be kept to its original size. Needless to say, the fisherman had plenty of fun over this picture with his fishing cronies. Most summer resorts are eager to obtain postcards of guests who have caught fish or game, and will order quantities of them to sell at the desk, or to use in their advertising. Mr. Hughes develops and finishes all his pictures himself. Thus he can secure the effects he wants, and he can make various experiments with the negatives. He has also been able to learn considerably more about taking pictures than he would if they had been developed by someone else. He has acquired the knack of reproducing old pictures, such as daguerreotypes, and has saved many a valued old picture from oblivion. There is simply no end to ways of making money from snapshots once you have mastered the knack of taking pictures of people in action. Style scouting with a camera. Manufacturers in the textile field are constantly seeking ideas and motifs that can be used in new designs. They pay liberally for photographs, in some cases as much as $1,000, that suggest unusual style themes. Marion Stevenson, of New York, was aware of this but never suspected that style scouting had business possibilities until she sold her first photograph to a New York silk company. Inside of 3 months she was making good money, and was going all over the world with her camera looking for unusual shots which might suggest interesting or unusual style motifs to designers. "I went to France, England, Germany, and Italy," said Miss Stevenson, "where I hunted out gatherings of smart people, and snapped moving pictures and stills of them for style notes to help manufacturers plan new lines. It is interesting work, and there is an ever-widening field for it. I pay my own expenses, but there is enough profit from this specialized work to make it worthwhile. Style scouting isn't difficult. I don't know exactly how to tell anyone how to go about it because there are no definite rules to follow. However, I believe that any woman who loves clothes and is observant could do well as a style scout. In my work, I use photographs because I am not an artist and cannot make sketches. A woman with a sense of line and color, who can sketch a little, should be able to get more feeling in design than I am able to and could soon make herself independently wealthy. Any concern dependent upon style is a prospect for such pictures and is constantly on the alert for suggestions. As special training is not required for this type of work, the girl who is observant and anxious to get started in an interesting and profitable profession might well consider style scouting. Walking the dog. A profitable business has been developed in New York by a group of enterprising young men who call themselves the dog walkers. The only capital necessary consists of proper clothing for the season, good legs, and a love of dogs. The dog walkers are to be seen on Upper 5th and Park Avenues and in Central Park, giving their pedigreed charges an airing. This service is appreciated by elderly people who like the companionship of dogs but do not have the energy to give them long walks, by invalids, and by business people who cannot find time regularly for this duty. In Chicago, another group has also developed a dog walking, dog washing and dog clipping service for busy dog owners. Another service for dogs, developed in New York, is what is called the Puppy Club. The Park Lane Hotel inaugurated the Puppy Club, which is located on the roof. Here dogs may lunch, snooze, play or be groomed while their owners have their luncheon in the hotel dining room. The pup's owner may leave him all afternoon, if he wishes, to sun himself. An expert veterinary prescribes diet and treatments. The space used for the purpose is so located that it is suitable for nothing else and the equipment and decorations are both inexpensive. The idea has not only brought in money for otherwise wasted space, but it keeps the canine pets of hotel guests and visitors out of the hotel proper. What one man did with an old truck. Several years ago the company that employed him failed and James Bradley was out of a job. In the small town of Ft. Atkinson, Wisconsin, there were none too many jobs and he found it more difficult every day to get something to do. From time to time, of course, he would pick up a little job here and there, but nothing that was permanent. One day he was walking around his little place trying to decide what to do, when he happened to glance at an old truck chassis in his garage. Perhaps he could get some work trucking if he could fix the old machine up, was his thought. A junkyard a few blocks away furnished the material for a body and when it was put on the truck and painted, James Bradley was ready for work. Business was hard to get at first. Both he and his wife kept eyes and ears open for any possible chances of trucking jobs. The first job was hauling the household goods of a local resident who was moving to Milwaukee. Another similar job in a nearby town turned up, and gradually he found himself picking up odd jobs here and there that the large trucking companies would not bother to handle. Today, James Bradley has a fleet of trucks, has the franchise for all the trucking on the route to Milwaukee, and has several special contracts to handle the hauling of various companies. One of these companies is Republic Steel of Milwaukee. Arrangements have also been made with other trucking companies all over the country to connect with their shipments at specific points in the territory which he covers. Traders Exchange does a national business. The Traders Exchange, an agency for national barter, is only 3 years old but it is one of the largest swapping agencies in the country. Mr. Savino Morizzo, who runs it, claims that he handles $500,000 in goods annually and has taken in as many as 4,500 items in a month. Around 36,000 letters pass through his hands each month and he will handle the swapping of anything under the sun, merchandise, farm produce, livestock, pets, etc. The story goes that a student in Alabama who had a saxophone wanted a microscope, a widow living in Arizona had a microscope but wanted some pigs, and a farmer in Oklahoma, who had 6 baby pigs, wanted a saxophone. The Traders Exchange put the farmer, the widow, and the student in touch with one another. The exchange was made all around, and everyone was satisfied. Some of the strangest trades have been 6 gray squirrels for a vacuum cleaner, 49 shaving brushes and a marble slab for a coupe, and a set of castanets, a Spanish comb and a fancy costume for a course of 6 beauty treatments. While this exchange has a national setup and is in a position to make considerable money through the large volume of business done, There is an excellent opportunity in many a small town for a similar exchange which could operate more or less locally. An inexpensive store, your own home, or space in another store, could be used for the purpose. Handbills and local newspaper advertising will bring you requests for items or will put you in touch with people who have things to sell. Once your store becomes known around the countryside, your clientele will naturally develop through word-of-mouth advertising. At a period like the present, when money is scarce, swapping is in high favor. Boys Club proves profitable. Fred Johnston had been quite an athlete in college. He found it difficult to get the sort of work he wanted after he left school, so he made a job for himself which not only paid him well but filled a community need. He started a club of boys interested in athletics. He calls it the Evanston Boys Club, and divides the boys into two groups. The first group is composed of boys 8 years old or younger. It meets after school 2 days each week and on Saturday mornings. The second group of boys from 9 to 14 years of age meets 3 afternoons each week. The charge for each boy is $12.50 a month, and with from 20 to 25 boys in each group, Fred Johnston's income runs between $500 and $600 a month. Out of this amount he pays such expenses as the fee for the use of a swimming pool, the salary of an assistant, the operation of a caddy wagon, and other incidentals. The club is a year-round affair and is divided into 2 semesters, the spring-summer term and the fall-winter term. The athletic activities vary according to the season and include baseball, football, swimming, boxing, hiking, rowing and gymnasium work. Special arrangements are made with one of the local hotels for the use of the swimming pool during periods when it is too cold for the lake. Of course, during the swimming season, the boys are taken to the beach for their swimming lessons. On rainy days, the boys are instructed in making such things as kites and toy airplanes which they are later taught to fly. From time to time, Fred Johnston or his assistant takes the boys on all-night hikes or hikes over the weekend in order that they may learn something about woodcraft. A caddy wagon, a truck fitted with seats, is used to transport the boys to the various locations where they are to play. At the end of the term he holds an athletic event at the hotel swimming pool and all the boys' parents and friends are invited to attend. Even the little fellows are entered in the boxing contests and their skill is always a surprise to the spectators. Naturally, this exhibit has a promotional value and results in added names to the roster of the Boys Club. This is an activity which any young man residing in a fairly prosperous community can undertake if he has had some athletic training and knows how to handle groups of boys. Young women can also handle similar groups of girls. In this case, the athletic training would be in such sports as swimming, diving, tennis, basketball, hiking and skating. Meals for Dogs is a business now. A wide-awake woman in New York has built up an unusual business preparing meals for dog owners who do not have the time or do not want to bother preparing food for their pets. This daily service to dog owners is operated under the name of the Canine Catering Company. The business has grown so rapidly that branches have been established in a half-dozen nearby towns as well as offices in Philadelphia and Washington. Businesses of this nature have also thrived in Chicago and Los Angeles. A business such as this can only be started in a community where there are plenty of purebred dogs, whose owners have money enough not only to purchase such dogs but to care for them properly. It naturally follows that you must know something about diets for dogs, the quantity necessary for daily feedings for the various breeds, and the costs of the foods that go into the preparation of the meals. However, this information can be secured from any good book on the care of dogs. The only investment required is a light delivery truck which can be purchased second-hand for a few $100s, and paid for on time. The rate being charged for medium-sized breeds such as Airedales and Chows is 22 cents for one diet and 20 cents for a second. On Friday each dog is served a fish diet for which a charge of 14 cents is made. Meals for the smaller breeds such as Boston and Cairn Terriers are priced at 14 cents, Pekingese, 10 cents, and Scotties, Sealy Hams and Wire-haired Terriers, 18 cents. A specimen meal for the day for an Airedale consists of raw or cooked lean beef which is cubed or ground, string beans, or other greens and zwieback. How to start a postal card advertising service. Adam K. Anderson, an accountant in Salt Lake City, happened to come into a certain modernly equipped butcher shop when one of the partners was greeting a customer. "How do you do, Mrs. Smith?" he said. "I haven't seen you for more than 6 months. Have you moved away?" "No," she answered. "I still live at the same place, but it was a couple of blocks closer to go down the street the opposite direction and I just got into the habit of buying my meats there. I do hope you will come back and trade with us now," the butcher continued. "We certainly appreciate your business." "Think I will," she said. "Everything seems to look so nice here and you always took good care of our meat requirements. We're having company tomorrow evening and I'll telephone you what I will need. Give me a small sirloin for tonight." Thus an old customer was easily won back. It reminded Anderson that just a month ago he received a postal card from a local clothier which had caused him to buy an Easter suit at a store which he had not patronized for several years. The card was very simple. A little bar of music was reproduced roughly across the top. It was a couple of measures from the verse, "Should auld acquaintance be forgot?" Brief wording on the card said the management had missed his patronage, that his business was appreciated, and that they hoped he would be in to buy an Easter suit. If winning back old customers was that easy, he thought, why didn't more merchants take steps to go after old customers? Mr. Anderson talked it over with the butcher and explained about the postal card idea. He found out that the butcher had recently counted the old accounts on the books which had showed no entries for the past couple of months, and the total, nearly 600, startled him. Anderson left the shop determined to find out how those postals were produced. The next day he learned there were several different duplicating and addressing machines for handling postal card advertising, and that these small machines were available for as low as $35. A salesman selling one of the machines became interested in the idea and gave him several samples of postal cards produced on his machine for advertising purposes. Anderson was satisfied that here was a means for making money during his forced vacation of 1 month without pay in a dull season. He took the sample cards to the butcher. The butcher ordered a series of 3 to be sent to old customers at monthly intervals. Then, he went to the druggist who had a larger list, and secured an order for cards to old customers who had stopped buying, and another lot to present customers featuring some new special items. Next, a dry cleaner saw the possibilities of using the card idea. Soon Anderson had sold small jobs totaling over $2,500, to the upholstering shop, music store, paint store, lumber yard, and many other types of merchants and small manufacturing plants all around the city. He paid for the machine the first 2 weeks. His ink and supplies amounted to comparatively little. His biggest cost was the postal cards, costing a cent each at the post office, which, for the period, totaled less than $9.50. He was quick to offer ideas to the merchants, and for that reason got a little higher price for the work, which included writing up the cards for each case. The first month showed a nice profit. The second month, with the aid of his son, who had just graduated from high school, he handled the remaining orders that had been obtained. By the time the third month had rolled around, the total profit was sufficient to buy larger equipment and to set up his son in a small business. Bringing the show to the audience, when the carnival to which he was attached disbanded, J. E. Cox found himself in a small town in Georgia. Forced to remain there for several days, he studied this town carefully. Its population was less than 100. It had no entertainment facilities. It was drab and colorless, yet as he looked it over, Cox hit upon an idea that since has brought him profits enough to cause the mouth of any big city theater man to water. Cox's idea was patterned after that which brought prosperity to owners of showboats in the old river days. He brought a show to people in the hinterland, miles from the railroads. But he didn't bring a troupe of players. He brought talking motion pictures instead. He went down to Atlanta and bought a portable sound projecting unit, dipping into an old-fashioned money bag for the $300 to pay for it, and put the unit in his second-hand truck. With the equipment, he was given a portable screen and a 1,000-foot film, entitled The Battle, which he used when he put on his first show the following night in a town 100 miles from Atlanta. He rented a schoolroom for this first performance and invited the town to attend. They turned out in force, and many in this audience were listening to a talkie for the first time. He traveled to the next town the day following, and again rented a 8 schoolroom, crowding in 175 customers to each of 2 performances. Cox charged an admission fee of 15 cents in both towns, and decided to maintain that fee as a fixed policy. At the end of the first week his profits were $104.50, so he decided to get a better film to show in a town of 1,600 population on his schedule for the following Saturday. This new film, featuring a musical comedy, was ordered shipped to that town and was there when he arrived. There was a larger attendance in this town than in the others. People came in from the hills to see it, and he stayed there for 4 days. This proved so profitable that he abandoned one-night stands, and now makes 2 stops weekly. Before leaving one small town, he makes an early morning trip to the next town on his schedule, stopping along the way to post announcements on trees, fences, and barns telling where his next show will be given, thus assuring himself of a good audience. His average weekly expenses have been running about $62 and his profits generally a little better than $150 a week, a tidy little income. Cox's idea may profitably be carried out in many parts of the country, where the towns and villages are some distance removed from railroads and cities. There are even communities of 2,000 population which do not have a motion picture theater. Cox does not rent first or second run films, but buys old numbers and uses them over and over again at a small cost for each performance. Trucking fruit from Florida. A truck farmer living near Menominee, Michigan, found the going rather hard during the Depression, and in trying to find ways and means of bolstering up the family income, hit upon the idea of trucking fruit. The truck he had been using to transport his garden produce was now standing idle most of the time. His eldest son was also idle, having been unable to find any work since he had finished high school. The truck and the boy were accordingly dispatched to Florida to buy citrus fruits, and when the truck returned loaded with fruit, he sold out all of it within a few days. Until now, tropical fruits had been high in Menominee. Now that he could sell them a little cheaper, the public bought him out each time the truck returned from a trip. Today, 4 trucks are running between Florida and Menominee to supply the demand for fresh fruits. In addition, he has opened 4 stores to handle the produce brought in by his trucks. 2 of these stores are in Menominee, and 2 in Marinette, Wisconsin, which is just across the river. His market, which takes in these 2 towns and the surrounding territory, includes about 35,000 population. How money can be made in cemeteries? During an automobile trip from his home in Kansas City to a nearby town, Arthur T. Ruggles noticed several rundown cemeteries. Here, thought Ruggles, is an opportunity to make some money. So he went to see the key man on the board who had charge of one of the cemeteries. This man was frank to admit the cemetery was in sad need of having the edges of the drives cleaned up, removing the ruts from the roadways, removing the brush from various spots where lots were unsold, leveling the land in locations where it was rough, planting grass seed, and similar work which the keeper was unable to do. He said it was difficult to keep lot owners satisfied and to sell additional lots with the cemetery in such a condition. Then the real obstacle came to light. There is always some obstacle to be hurdled. The board member said they just did not have the money to get this extra work done. But Mr. Ruggles was not to be stopped by this hurdle. This alibi about not having the money is an ancient one. He thought for a moment. Then an idea came to him. He told the board member that he might take cemetery lots in payment for the job. The board member jumped at the opportunity. So a deal was made. The arrangement was that Ruggles was to receive cemetery lots valued at $2,000 for the work specified. He hired a couple of gardeners to help him do the work. In the meantime, he employed a salesman on a commission arrangement to help him sell the lots. Mr. Ruggles knew that the psychological time to sell the lots was when the work was progressing on the improvements. Before the job was finished, the lots had been sold. The labor and materials for the job actually came to less than $500. The salesman's commissions totaled $500. This left Ruggles with an actual profit of about $1,000 on the deal. It was a deal that made everyone concerned satisfied and happy. Mr. Ruggles then started a more ambitious plan to make the same deal with cemetery companies in other localities, with the result that he is now at the head of a thriving and prosperous business, netting him several $1,000s a year. Turning ashes into gold. John Towns, assayer, owner of the Maryland Smelting and Refining Company, San Antonio, Texas, struck gold right in the heart of the city. It was like this: one day, while Mr. Towns chanced to be watching the janitor of a local building, which housed a number of dentists, carting away ashes from the building's incinerator, a sudden idea came to him. "Give me a sample of those ashes," he remarked. He took the ashes to his office and assayed them. He discovered that the sample contained enough gold to average $140 worth of gold to the ton. So his hunch was right. Dentists work with gold, filing, scraping and molding it. Naturally, tiny particles and dust fell to the floor and were swept up, finally ending up in the ashes of the incinerator. He contracted to buy the sweepings from this building. Thus began one of America's strangest businesses, and one of the most profitable in consideration of the investment required. Beginning in San Antonio, Mr. Towns rapidly expanded his purchases. He bought sweepings from medical office buildings in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston, one Dallas building sweepings assaying $700 worth of gold to the ton. Today Mr. Towns buys sweepings from medical office buildings in 30 different states. He receives about 10 tons of ashes and sweepings per month, with the assay running all the way from a little better than $100 to $2,000 per ton. Yet the famed Juneau Gold Mine of Alaska is being operated successfully with an assay of only 50 cents worth of gold per ton. Naturally, this is a specialized business, requiring special skill and knowledge. Not everyone could do it, of course. It does show, however, the buried opportunities that lie all about you, if you will keep your eyes and mind open for them. A club truck garden. A truck farmer in New York State had been raising garden truck for several years and peddling it house to house. For some time he had been dissatisfied with the small returns on his labor, but he didn't seem to be able to find a way out of his difficulties. One evening as he stood looking out over his farm pondering how his customers and his crops could be brought together in a more lucrative manner, he hit upon the idea of organizing a group of people and planting their gardens for them. His family at first thought the idea impossible, but he went ahead with building up his club and soon he had organized a group of 100 members. Each member may select the vegetables he wants: peas, sweet corn, carrots, radishes, lettuce, and other vegetables, and the truck farmer plants them on his place. The charge for planting, cultivating and fertilizing the vegetables is $1 a row. The members have the pleasure of driving out to the farm whenever they wish to select and gather their own vegetables. 9 times out of 10, when they depart with their cars filled with vegetables, they have some honey, butter, or eggs packed away in the car, too. The farmer is clever enough not only to get them to come to him for their vegetables, but while they are on the spot, he sells them some of the products from which he gets a good cash income. Dowagers and others whose affections are lavished on a snippy Pomeranian are not the only ones who use the Canine Catering Company's unique service. It is also a boon to housewives who believe that the diet for the dog is quite an important matter. A business that has real possibilities: the Fix-It Shop. This shop is located in Winnetka, Illinois. A light truck in conjunction with the store is used to give 10-minute service. Planning little dinners for restaurants. Helen Ewing, 59 East Madison Street, Chicago, was just one of the many thousands of women rated as good cooks. Not long ago she became acquainted with the wife of a restaurant owner, who one day remarked about the difference in home and restaurant cooking. "If someone could only get my husband to make up a more varied menu," said this friend, "he would probably be able to keep his customers. So many people stop coming because they say that the menu is monotonous." Later, upon hearing about a successful restaurant operator in California, who attributed his success to the great variety of dishes he served, Miss Ewing decided to look into the subject of menus. "After going around to many restaurants and examining the menus, I discovered that restaurant men wanted to be relieved from making up their own menus," stated Miss Ewing. "I also found that they needed variety in their menus, something fresh and different daily which would revive interest in their dinners. At the same time it occurred to me that the secret of keeping flavor and appeal in food was to cook it in smaller quantities. This is the only way that chefs can get that home cooking flavor. So I made up what I call a series of little dinners and submitted them to several restaurant proprietors. They considered them and then agreed to use them. That's how I got started on my present career." Miss Ewing opened an office in a Chicago Loop office building and began selling little luncheon menus to Chicago restaurant proprietors. She calls this unusual business a planning service, and charges a flat rate of $5 a month for it. In less than a year, she secured subscriptions to this service from nearly 200 restaurants, and her profits now run into several $100s a month. She did what thousands of women have the ability and qualifications to do: plan simple, inexpensive meals. A similar service might be profitably started in other cities, inasmuch as there are thousands of small restaurant proprietors who lack the imagination to plan a well-balanced and varied menu themselves. In making up the menu for a small luncheon which retails, say, for 25 or 30 cents, it is well to bear in mind that the restaurant must secure a minimum of twice the retail cost of each food item served, in order to make a profit. Thus a 25-cent meal should cost the restaurant not more than 12.5 cents. Recipes showing the proper amount of each food offered should be submitted daily with this service, the same recipes being sent to each chef using them. It is not necessary to invest much money in a service of this nature. Simply prepare the first menu, have it mimeographed, and mail copies to each subscriber. In preparing these menus, always keep in mind the seasonal changes in foods. A Fix-It Shop on wheels. For 50 years, George Burley, of Des Moines, Iowa, who is now 77 years old, has made a good living fixing things that others can't. His slogan is, "If Burley can't fix it, throw it away." In his little shop, which is at the back of his home, he repairs furniture, picture frames, replaces broken glass in mirrors or pictures, re-silvers mirrors, paints old furniture with great skill, mends china, repairs broken dolls, recanes broken seats or backs of chairs, restores the finish on old furniture, polishes silver and brass, cuts glass to any required size, repairs enameled signs, repairs pottery, cleans leather saddles and other leather goods, cleans rust from metal objects and instruments, cleans and mends ivory objects, sharpens knives and lawn mowers, and repairs many other things the average person lacks skill to handle. People have come to have perfect confidence in him and will entrust some of their most prized possessions to his skillful hands. It has taken time, of course, to build up this confidence and its resulting list of steady customers. He secured the needed formulas for use in this work by reference to standard books in the field such as Henley's 20th Century Book of Recipes, Formulas, and Processes. Additional money is made by the preparation and sale to customers of an excellent furniture polish. In preparing this polish, he did not try to compete with any of the cheaper polishes on the market, but made a high-priced product which brings him a good profit on each bottle. Most of his work is done in his own shop, where he has the proper equipment and tools to handle almost any kind of repair job. However, in some cases the work is of such a nature it has to be handled in the customer's home. In Philadelphia, the Fix-It business has been developed by one man to a point where he requires a fleet of Ford trucks to patrol the city. If a housewife has a leaky faucet, or her electric iron goes on the fritz, instead of sending for a plumber or an electrician who would probably charge $2 or $3 to fix it, she calls Mr. Fix-It. Within an hour, the Fix-It truck rolls up to the door, and in a few minutes the repair has been made. The success of this venture lies in the fact that each truck carries a complete assortment of repair parts for fixing almost anything that can go wrong in a house, and using the block system to speed up service. Truck drivers are required to keep in telephone communication with the dispatcher at headquarters. As each call comes in, it is put on file, and when the driver telephones, he is given a list of all calls on file in his district. This makes it possible to give rapid-fire service and low prices to the customer. Since the needed repairs and tools are in the truck, and not in some plumber's or electrician's shop a mile or more away, the usual excessive charge for going back after tools and repair parts is avoided. There is no reason why there should not be a Fix-It truck in every city. All that is needed to start such a business is some knowledge of home appliances and equipment, about $50 for an initial stock of miscellaneous repair parts, a few special tools such as a reamer for seating faucet valves, and a light truck which can be converted into a Fix-It shop on wheels. Starting an art academy on a shoestring. Have you considered that in these days of leisure, one of the surest ways to make money is to help people to use their leisure time to improve their minds? Americans are fast becoming art conscious. Businessmen are organizing art clubs, and women, released from housekeeping drudgery by the advent of electrical appliances, are going in for music, drama, and the other arts. Young people just out of school, finding jobs scarce, are studying drawing and design. All of which spells opportunity for those who know something about art. Best of all, you can start an art school with no money whatever. Eleanor Verand had no money at all when she decided to start the New York Academy of Arts. So she went to the owner of an office building and offered a course of instruction in art for his daughter in exchange for office rent. Then she discovered that she needed a stenographer and a clerk, so she arranged instruction in art and music for stenographic work. A piano, 2 large mirrors, easels, and a model stand were given to her by a woman in exchange for her daughter's painting lessons, and the new art academy was soon on its way. The day it opened, the energetic Miss Verand enrolled several students, and soon had sufficient money to carry her along. I taught a carpenter how to dance in exchange for a neat job of installing partitions, and because a Polish cook wanted her daughter to be a dancer, I arranged to give lessons which were paid by supplying the faculty with meals, declared Miss Verand. There wasn't a great deal of money in the first few months, but trading around as I did, enabled me to get by. About 100 pupils were enrolled, most of them working out their tuition in one way or other, but a few paid real money. I started this school because I was tired of the stage, and though I had no money, I was determined to start anyway. This determined little lady at 15 was giving imitations of Spinelli, Mistinguett, and Yvonne Printemps in Paris nightclubs. At 16 she was premiere danseuse of the Lyon Opera. She danced in Ziegfeld's Three Musketeers, appeared in movies as a double for Vilma Banky, and studied dancing with Tarasov, Kobelev, and Fakin. With this background, Eleanor was a competent instructress in art, and felt at the time, she needed nothing but a chance to start. Young and ambitious people who are determined to do things, may find a way of getting started by applying the barter principle as Miss Verand applied it. If you have no money, start in a business for which you are qualified, using the barter and trade idea for capital. Catering to school children. When Mrs. Frank Hartman, who lived in a Chicago suburb, found it difficult to keep the family going comfortably on its diminished income, she hit upon the idea of serving luncheons and dinners to school children. Once she had decided upon the plan, it didn't take long for the news to get around the neighborhood. Her little girl of 9 told the school children, and Mrs. Hartman told her neighbors, friends, members of her church and club. She found getting luncheon for a group of youngsters was a lot of fun. The children said that the luncheons were like parties, and they eagerly looked forward to a day that mother would be going to a bridge luncheon or into Chicago or visiting elsewhere, so that they could have luncheon at Mrs. Hartman's with the other youngsters. The fact that they were served nourishing food was a big point in favor of having the children eat at Mrs. Hartman's. Instead of the youngsters buying 15 cents worth of candy and a ham sandwich or a bowl of soup at some school store, they paid their 25 cents for a well-balanced meal. Luncheons consisted of milk or cocoa, bread in some form, butter, fruit for dessert, homemade cookies or cake, and a main course. In winter the main course was a hot dish such as baked macaroni, baked rice with little pieces of meat in it, or a baked tomato stuffed with rice. In summer she served a vegetable salad with graham bread, or a scooped-out tomato filled with cottage cheese, or some other cool dish. The meals were served on a long refectory table, and each dish was daintily prepared and served. Whenever possible, she served dishes in fancy forms such as individual molds of jello, individual iced cakes, cookies cut in fancy shapes, etc. These little touches did not mean any more expense, but they did entail more work. However, it was such attention to detail that brought the same children back again and again. Whenever possible, she catered to a child's particular liking for some one food, serving it in turn with some other dish that the other children liked. Her own little girl being at the table made the luncheon group seem like one big family. Her figures on a meal run about 15 cents for dessert, 12 to 15 cents for milk, 8 cents for a loaf of bread, 20 cents for the main course, and about 5 or 6 cents for butter. Adding about 10 cents to this amount for gas consumed, the cost of each meal runs around 70 or 80 cents. A group of 10 at 25 cents each thus leaves a profit of about $1.50 to $1.75, and the work at the most takes only 2 hours. As she charges 50 cents for dinner, 2 or 3 little guests pay for the family dinner and leave a little for profit. Mr. Hartman is a kindly, genial man who enjoys having children around, and he generally walks home with them after dinner to see that they reach there safely. If the mothers want them to stay for the entire evening until called for, Mrs. Hartman charges 50 cents additional for each child. At one time she made a list of the names of children's parents and had her sister type each mother a letter in which she described the various menus served the children. She also emphasized the fact that the best ingredients were used in cooking and that the children were served only foods suitable for young, growing people. A few of these letters were also sent to others she thought might be prospects and resulted in a number of new faces around her luncheon table. Nickel in the slot pool tables. Coin-operated machines have become a craze in this country. Marvin Owens, for instance, bought 3 tables, placed them in busy taverns, and is well on the way to making his $1,000. These tables require no attention. They are standard, official billiard tables upon which a regulation pool game may be played. You simply drop a nickel in the slot, and are then ready to play a full game of pool. Counters, cues, chalk, and other necessary equipment are furnished with the table. I thought when I first saw the illustration of this table that it was another one of those pool table toys, Mr. Owens told our editor. But investigation quickly dispelled this idea. The table is a regulation table on which you shoot a regulation game. The beauty of it is that one or more persons can play for the same price. Many men have an idea they're pool sharks and, of course, when they see the pool table, they want to prove their skill. The result is a good play wherever a table is set up, especially in taverns. I started with 3 tables. Today I have 10 in operation, and collect once every 2 weeks. The tables cost me $70 each, and pay me a profit of about $14 weekly. I give the tavern owner a commission of 25%. The novelty of a coin-operated pool game appeals to almost every man who has ever handled a cue. Even people who have not played a game of pool in years become enthusiasts. More play is given the coin-operated table, therefore, than a regular pool table. The one drawback to continued operation of these tables is that when the tavern owner sees how good a play he gets, he wants to buy the table outright. This has happened several times, and while I haven't as yet sold the tables, I'm figuring on letting the tavern owners have them since the resale price of $125 offers a good profit on each table. Owens feels there is never a good reason for turning down profit. He declares his future policy will be to take the profit from operating the machines as long as possible, and then to sell them to the taverns, ensuring himself of a two-way profit on his money. The idea is worth considering, if you want to make money operating this type of coin machine. There are many good locations in all parts of the country where this table ought to pay, since no gambling objection may be raised to the machine. Turning a natural flair to profit. A principle of business success too often overlooked is striving to do some one thing better than anybody else is doing it. This idea is well expressed in that old saw about the man who can build a better mousetrap being sought out, however far he may be from the beaten path. Take guns, for instance. You would hardly think of gun doctoring as being a business that would make money. Guns are such incidental things. Yet Jack Roske, of San Francisco, has found it highly profitable. In 1927, while still in high school, Jack Roske used to drop in on a gunsmith because he was curious about firearms. Some of his questions were too deep for the gunsmith. He was an artisan, not an oracle, but he was deeply impressed. The boy was a natural. He let Jack help him after school, teaching him many things, and after graduation took him in as an apprentice and kept him until the business failed. Roske then went to punching cattle, but his interest in firearms never flagged and he continued studying about guns past and sent. There are few really authoritative books on the subject of firearms, and these, having been printed in limited editions numbering 1,000 or less, come high. Some cost $5, some $25, but the gun student gladly sacrificed many pleasures in order to possess these books. He joined the National Rifle Association and read magazines, catalogs, anything he could find about guns. Eventually he was able to look at any gun and tell you all about it, which means something when you consider that there are approximately 90,000 types, not counting minor variations. When Jack returned to San Francisco, his gunsmith friend was back in business but could give him only part-time work. Anyway, repairing ordinary guns was no kind of job for one with his highly specialized capabilities. His talent had been molded into an art. But where could he make his services valuable? Then came the proof that an artist in any line will inevitably find his right place. 2 years ago there opened in San Francisco, a unique establishment known as the Far West Hobby Shop, a collector's mecca. China, pioneer relics, costume books, and hundreds of things rare and curious are found there. Its most noteworthy collection, however, is firearms. The shop has the largest stock of guns on the Pacific Coast, over 600 and principally collector's items. There are little derringers, like the one used to assassinate Lincoln, big 1836 Pattersons, and the first Colt model. There are ornate French dueling pistols in elaborate hand-carved cases, and plain, solid, purely American rifles such as Daniel Boone used to fight off the Indians. The need was for a gun expert thoroughly familiar with the history and operation of firearms, one who could put into condition old models bought by the shop and tell visitors all about the various guns in stock. A man, in short, who could take charge of the firearms from the time they entered the shop until they went out. It is a difficult post, but Jack Roske fills it to perfection. Being young, handsome and as physically fit as a Zane Grey hero is one more point in his favor. His native talent, combined with his knowledge acquired through years of study and experience, gives him a sixth sense which enables him to take an ancient, incomplete model to pieces, fabricate the missing parts, and reassemble the whole with no guide or precedent. He says it's like learning shorthand. You keep on working and practicing until it becomes second nature. His 4 years of mechanical drawing and 2 years of woodworking crafts have, no doubt, helped him considerably. A play club makes money. Mrs. James McAllister's husband traveled for a dress firm and was away from home anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks at a time. Time hung heavy on her hands even though she had an apartment to care for and a 6-year-old daughter. One day as Mrs. McAllister was about to take her little daughter to the beach to play, her neighbor asked if her little girl might go along. Mrs. McAllister consented, and when she returned the little girl to her mother, the latter said, "You have no idea how nice it was to be able to play bridge without having to take Jean Marie along with me, and to know that she was in good hands." The incident gave Mrs. McAllister the idea of taking charge of several children each afternoon. Across one end of her living room was a large sun porch which was heated in winter time. Here, she figured, she could entertain a number of children any afternoon it rained, and when it was not raining she could take them to the beach, to the zoo, to the parks, or other places of interest. She formed what she called a play club and explained her plan to several mothers in the building who, she knew, were bridge fans. The first week 3 children from 3 different families were entered in her play club, and she contracted to take care of them every afternoon from 12:30 o'clock until 6 for $25 a month. Time over that period until 8 o'clock was charged for at the rate of 25 cents an hour. After 8 o'clock the charge was 50 cents an hour. The play club included, in addition to supervised play, instruction in conversation and manners, and a certain amount of education along general lines such as learning the names of flowers, animals, fish, trees, birds, the names of the city streets, parks, etc. As Mrs. McAllister had been a school teacher before her marriage, she was well equipped to teach the children these simple things. The old family car was called into service, and each afternoon she collected her group of children and drove to the place she had picked to spend the afternoon. When it rained, she gathered the youngsters in the sun room where they played games for a while, after which she read to them while they relaxed. Then she got them interested in some type of simple work such as making scrapbooks, painting with watercolors, or modeling with clay. At 5:45 she began to get them ready to go home and deliver them safely and promptly at 6 o'clock to their mothers. When the children were taken to the beach or the park in the afternoon, she always started home with them by 5 o'clock in order to have them rest for 15 or 20 minutes in her home before she delivered them to their mothers. 2 large thermos bottles of milk or fruit juice and a tin of cookies or gingerbread were taken along each afternoon in order that the children might have something to eat about 3 o'clock. Sometimes, a child was sent to her at noon for lunch as well as for the afternoon, or one of the children would be left with her for dinner. For either the noon or evening meal she charged a flat rate of 50 cents. At the end of 5 weeks, Mrs. McAllister had the care of 2 children every afternoon and 5 children twice a week. The charge for the 5 children who came twice a week was $10 a month each. A little figuring will show that Mrs. McAllister was making a fair income from her play club, as her only expenses consisted of gas and oil for the car, and milk and cookies each day. It was pleasant work, too. Mrs. McAllister enjoyed the children and they enjoyed her. Several of the children came from families in which father was too busy making money and mother too busy playing bridge to give any time to their offspring. This gave her a chance to open an entirely new world to the youngsters. She had a little difficulty with a few of them at first because they were bored, spoiled or selfish, and had never learned how to play with other children. But it wasn't long before she got them interested in something other than themselves, and soon they were having the time of their lives. While any woman of average intelligence could handle this type of work, the woman who enjoys being with children and who is interested in their development will have a greater chance of being successful. Specializing in dog sketches. The name Diana Thorne immediately calls up a picture of a most successful artist. Yet Miss Thorne had a tremendously difficult time just earning enough to keep body and soul together until she found the way to capitalize her skill. Like many another person with a talent, many a man or woman with a clever business idea, she lacked the right slant on her work. She failed to specialize. Miss Thorne had all the advantages of study in Germany and England. But in London, when 19 years old, this was at the beginning of the war, she sold and mended typewriters, worked as a reporter, as a typist, as a scenario writer, anything to make some sort of living. She could find no demand for her sketches and almost despaired of getting ahead. When she returned to New York, she turned to typing to earn a living for herself and younger sister and brother. She admits that today she might still be struggling along except for a dog. She found him in a pet shop, and while his antecedents were probably not to be checked too carefully, he made a marvelous model. She sketched him, and in 1926 she sold her first dog picture, a young girl skating at breakneck speed behind a terrier. She called it Rollin' Home and it clicked. She found that 9 out of 10 people like dogs, especially puppies. A picture of a puppy just gets them. So with pencil and brush she pictured them in every conceivable mood, every sort of pose. Today, pedigreed pets are brought to her from all over the world to have their portraits done. She has become a dog illustrator of renown both here and in Europe. You look at the pictures of her Scotties and think they are the best she has done. Then you see the Spaniels, and you think they are the most cunning. Yet the Boston Terriers may intrigue you even more. Diana Thorne has arrived. If you feel that you cannot make a success of the one good talent you possess, if your business for some reason does not succeed, look around for an idea that will put your work above that of your competitors. If you make things, there is a way to make them more attractive to the buyer. If you sell things, you can change your method of selling so it will mean the difference between success and failure. Whatever you do, you can find some new slant that will open up a market for you. A new slant on the grab bag idea. Here is my recipe for making $1,000, said Chester Ryan. Get some gold diggers. This novelty machine, which looks like a small traveling crane or excavator, operates for a penny or a nickel. $5 or $6 worth of novelty merchandise, together with a quantity of candy, is placed in it and a little excavator picks out the candy or a novelty, depending upon your luck. The novelties include cameras, fancy cigarette lighters, wrist watches, fountain pens, celluloid dice and similar items. These novelties may be redeemed by the store owner or retained by the lucky player as desired. I buy good-looking cameras for $3 a dozen, cigarette lighters for $3.60 a dozen, and fountain pens for 29 cents. I can get cheaper articles, but they do not have the looks. This is an important factor in your success, for the secret of getting people to go for your cameras, lighters, watches, etc., is the appearance of quality in these items. They must look good and they must look easy for the digger to pick up. While the retail selling price of any article in the case may be only $1 or $2, the fun of taking a chance seems to be sufficient to get most players to take a few chances. The machine needs little servicing and always works. When I started using them, however, I made the mistake of thinking I could get by with shoddy merchandise. I didn't know much about picking the best locations either. Realizing that one good location is worth 10 poor ones, I studied ways of selecting choice spots. I learned quickly that the fellow who wants to make big money has to study locations as scientifically as the chain stores. He must check the number of persons entering a drug store, barber shop, cigar store, candy store or delicatessen. He should know just about when the big crowd comes in and if there ever is a big crowd. He will find that if a crowd hangs around a place for an hour and then moves on with practically no more patronage coming in that night, there is no chance of success with this machine. At best, a machine in such a place will take in only about $10 a week. A tavern, cafe, drugstore, or candy store on a good neighborhood corner in any city, however, has people coming in and out all afternoon and evening. If more than 5 people are in the store all the time, you can bet that your average play on the excavator is going to be pretty good. A machine placed in a location of that kind will easily kick out a profit of $25 or $30 a week. I pay my store owners a 35% commission on the amount in the cash box, less redemption payoff. That's a liberal split, but then I have my machines in good spots and it's worth the difference. In one drugstore where I placed a machine a year ago, the play tons $29 a day. It's a busy place all day long. A number of doctors drop in there off and on, and they never go out without putting from 50 cents to $1 in the machine. Because of the heavy play in this place, I have to drop around every 3 or 4 days and put in new merchandise. One reason why the Gold Digger is so popular is because of the average man's belief he can beat these machines. As a matter of fact, no machine is made to be beaten. It's made to pay a profit, and always does, but the belief is strong enough to cause people to play them over and over again. They don't care what they win. Their objective is to beat the game. A few do beat it. But a majority don't. All play it for the fun of playing and for the sport of winning. That's the spirit that animates every player. During his first 6 weeks operating these machines, Ryan's profit amounted to well over $1,000. He bought the machines outright, paying $89 for each one. If you intend operating a machine of this kind, it might be well to start with one or more second-hand machines, which may be picked up at small cost. There is real money to be made in this enterprise. Service to mothers becomes a business. Over 2 million babies are born in this country every year. That means a market for all sorts of clothing, equipment, toys, furniture, and other things. It also means a sizable market for equipment, clothing and supplies for the mothers. It remained for a woman to think up a service that would appeal to the majority of these 2 million mothers. She knew that they would like to find someone who would relieve them of the incessant laundry work connected with the baby's first year. She talked the idea over with her husband, Albert Lau. He was skeptical at first, but decided to give it a trial. The Dye Wash Incorporated, Chicago, was the result. The service appeals to practically every woman with a tiny baby. The company is developed somewhat on the towel supply service idea. It supplies the baby's napkins, calls for the soiled laundry and leaves the clean necessaries. Naturally, a business such as this must be built on the basis of absolute cleanliness and sanitation. A trip through the plant of the Dye Wash proves beyond a doubt that these two requisites are not just slogans, but absolute facts. So successfully has this idea taken hold that 16 branches of the Dye Wash are now in operation. These are not branches in the real meaning of the term, as each plant is independent of the parent plant. The operators of the 16 branches merely pay for the privilege of using the Dye license. This money-making business is another proof that where there is a genuine need for a service in a community, the man or woman who undertakes to provide that service economically and efficiently will soon be on his way toward making his first $1,000 and many more thousands. Put a billiard table in a store. When a tenant operating a cigar store in a building owned by H.L. Martin, Columbus, Ohio, renewed his lease for only 1/4 of the store, Martin was worried. It was almost impossible to get store tenants at that time. No one seemed willing to rent the rear of a store, and Martin soon gave up hope of finding a tenant. Then he considered the possibility of profitably using the space himself. A study of the cigar store's operations revealed that the younger men were inclined to remain in the store where they could meet and talk with friends late afternoons and evenings. After 4 o'clock each afternoon, there were always several men grouped about the cigar stand, who seemed to have nothing much to do. Catering to these men, reasoned Martin, providing them with wholesome amusement that would help his tenants' cigar sales, would be profitable. There was space in the store for 2 or 3 pocket billiard tables. There were enough men in the store most of the time to justify expectation of a fair play on the tables. So Martin decided to put in 2 tables. His tenant liked the idea, appreciating that the more people who entered the store, the more cigars and cigarettes he would sell. Tables and equipment were secured, and Martin opened the billiard room. He charged 5 cents a cue, or rented the tables to players at 50 cents an hour. Few rented the table by the hour, however. 2, 3 or 4 men usually played and paid for each game when they finished. The play on the tables was heaviest in the afternoons and evenings, and his profit for the first month was $156. Martin's total investment in tables and equipment was $198. The tables, bought from the manufacturer, had been reconditioned and were in good playing condition when he placed them in his store. He bought them on deferred payments, so that very little cash investment was necessary. Opportunities for opening pocket billiard rooms exist in many cities, and reconditioned equipment may be picked up from manufacturers everywhere. Store space in good locations is readily obtainable. By making arrangements with a barber or cigar dealer for use of space in barber shop or store, your rent is reduced and profit assured. In time, as your business prospers, and you have accumulated a few $1,000s in profits from it, you can spread out into a store of your own, with more tables. It is a business that requires no special training, and does not tie you down. It offers many opportunities for money-making sidelines. A Coca-Cola cooler in the corner, for instance, will make almost enough to pay the rent, and a few pin games or similar attractions are surefire moneymakers. In these days of leisure, there is a real opportunity to start a business which offers wholesome recreational facilities to the people in the community. It's almost a natural. There are few easier ways to make $1,000. A profitable auto travel business. Some years ago, A. Preciado planned to make a trip to the West Coast by automobile. In order to reduce his expenses and, at the same time, make the trip more pleasant, he advertised for a traveling companion on the share the expense basis. His advertisement in the newspaper brought over 100 replies, and a similar advertisement inserted when he was ready to make his return trip brought twice as many replies. When he reached his home, he decided that there was an opportunity to build up a good business catering to tourists, so he opened a travel agency which he called the Auto Travel Bureau. Most of the traveling companions on his list are students, summer school teachers, college professors, and business girls. However, even doctors, lawyers, and movie stars have made trips as extra passengers through the bureau. Women especially hate to go on long trips alone, he remarked, and part of my job is to locate responsible young college men to drive their cars for them. Because he filled a long-felt need and because of good business management, the business grew and prospered. Today, Mr. Preciado has several assistants and representatives in various key cities. He also has many competitors, but he lays claim to having been the first in the field. His cars now go all over the country, of course, but there is a certain demand for transportation to such cities as San Francisco, Chicago, St. Louis, etc., which has made it possible for him to arrange for regular transportation to such points. All rates are figured on a mileage basis. The greater the distance, the greater the cost. The Bureau gets a standard commission from the extra passenger, the balance going to the car owner. A new slant made this circulating library a success. When J. and R.M. Sullivan, of Chicago, investigated the circulating library business, they discovered larger profits were in store for the library, which delivered its books regularly to readers, rather than waited for readers to drop in for books when they felt inclined. Making no provision for drop-in business, they rented room space only in an office building on North Clark Street, and stocked a few volumes of standard authors. With a dozen of these volumes in a shopping sack, each began making the rounds of the large office buildings on Michigan Avenue and in the central business district of the city. The secretaries, stenographers, and clerks were, for the most part, the clientele at which they aimed. When a secretary on whom they called was not interested in the standard author they offered, one of the Sullivan brothers would inquire her taste in books and ask what books she would like him to bring her the following week. Making up their lists in this way from the preferences and requests of the office people on whom they called, they eventually built up a library of several thousand volumes and a clientele of 2,800 customers. The charge for membership in this perambulating library was $1 and the rental 50 cents per week on books costing $3 and over, 35 cents on books from $2.50 to $3, and 25 cents per week on books under $2.50. The Sullivan brothers each had regular days for calling on specified buildings, and they made the rounds of their entire clientele once a week. In order not to overload themselves unnecessarily with books in their daily rounds, each night preceding their morning call, they went over the file cards of the clients on whom they would call the following day, noting the books they had already read and making a selection from their new stock which would suit their customers' tastes. If, for instance, a client had started to read Jalna or the White Oaks of Jalna, he was sure to want Finch's Fortune next and then The Master of Jalna, also by the same author. A client who liked Hugh Walpole would be glad to get Vanessa, and a client who liked William Faulkner would probably like Erskine Caldwell. When Well of Loneliness was published, the brothers made a killing, buying 400 copies of this book, charging 50 cents per week rental and allowing members to hold it for 1 week only. For 2 years the 400 volumes were in constant circulation. Another big renter was White Girl of Vera Kasparis. 400 copies of this book were bought and kept in steady circulation. Books like these bring in tidy profits to the Sullivans. They guessed wrong, however, on Ulysses and, in this case, were overloaded with a book the public did not want. They buy their books wholesale for 30% off, or at the publishers for 40% off. This latter arrangement is seldom any saving, however, because of the cost of expressage. When books are finished as renters and stop moving entirely, they are sold to hospitals and other institutions and also to second-hand bookstores. Getting personally acquainted with their clientele, knowing their tastes, and having the patience and the time to come back if a girl is busy taking dictation when they call, so that she can always depend upon the arrival of her new book and the collection of her old one, have been chiefly responsible for the many steady and well-satisfied customers which these two Sullivans have accumulated. Satisfied customers in any business are the best advertising it can have. A clipping service for artists. While Carl Jackson was selling magazine subscriptions to artists and their friends, he learned that they frequently were at a loss for authentic illustrations to follow in making drawings. In the larger cities, the public libraries have files of illustrations, but it takes a great deal of valuable time to locate what is needed, and time to an artist is money. So he started a clipping service for artists. During the past 2 years, he has made better than $1,500 a year at practically no expense from this enterprise. The good artist, the leader in the field, uses my service as much as the poor man who can't afford to hire models, Jackson pointed out. Here in Chicago, several hundred men and women make their living from artwork of one kind or another. They can't buy all the magazines that are published, especially the higher-priced foreign publications, because it would take every cent they earn to do it. And they might never get an idea out of the publications they do buy. But there is artwork in every magazine. I clip the well-drawn illustrations from a group of picked magazines and index them. I am able to supply almost any type of illustration that an artist wants whenever he wants it, for making a sketch. For example, an artist is told to make a drawing that calls for an archer of the Robin Hood period. He calls me on the phone and I go to my file, pick out 2 or 3, and send them to him. My fee is $3. You see 47 steel filing cabinets here. I started with 1, and about 3 dozen magazines, which I had been carrying as samples when I was with the magazine subscription agency. I clipped every illustration and told a few artists about it. They had some special work such as illustrating a school textbook or making a drawing of old Mexico for a magazine, and they needed certain kinds of clippings. I happened to have them. The fees I got out of the illustrations from magazines enabled me to buy other magazines. I picked some up for a song at second-hand bookstores and I subscribed to the leading periodicals. One artist told another, and it wasn't long before I was doing a highly profitable business. Then I wrote a letter to several film companies, and explained the type of service I was offering artists, and mentioned that some of them had requested photographs of film stars to be used for magazine purposes. I was given a break by 2 studios, with the understanding that under no circumstances were the photographs sent me to be used for advertising in any way. The movie people have a remarkable facility for artistically posing their subjects, and the artists were hungry for those photographs. They bought them outright, at good prices, and for one lot, I received $75. In many cases the clippings are returned by the artist. When an artist returns the clippings in good condition, I allow him a discount of 50%. On an average, I have 9 calls for clippings, daily. Since most of the clippings are returned to my files, I average $1.80 an order. I deliver and make the collections myself. Frequently meeting a problem of a group of persons, such as artists, provides a service which is invaluable to the group, and at the same time, is highly profitable to you. A similar service for artists may be started in any town where there are enough artists to make a clipping service pay. However, the service need not be restricted to one locality. It may be expanded by mail to include nearby cities or towns, where such a service is certain to be highly appreciated. Practically no investment is required. Starts printing business at 65. Half a century ago, in the little town of Rossville, Illinois, Frank Fraley decided to learn the printer's trade. His stepfather owned the hotel in that village, and until he became a printer's devil, Frank had spent most of his time making beds, waiting on tables, stoking the old-fashioned stoves, and doing the many other odd jobs that turn up around the small town inn. But in those days, the printer was the aristocrat of the trades, going to work with a long frock coat and high silk hat. To a young man, the idea of becoming such a grand fellow was fascinating. So a printer he became, and a good one. In turn, he drifted from Rossville to Danville, to Bloomington, to Springfield, and finally to the Twin Cities of Champaign-Urbana, where he has spent the most of his life. For a while, he worked as foreman of several of the local shops, and with the Urbana Courier-Herald. Dad Fraley became known as a printer who planned each job with as much feeling for craftsmanship as the painter who does a picture, or the musician who writes a symphony. There are few printers today who can equal Dad as a typographer. Soon he had his own shop in Urbana, and leading businessmen went to him for their printing jobs, and the students at the University of Illinois for their dance programs. But the life of the owner of a printing shop is strenuous. Dad Fraley's boy had finished college, and there seemed no reason why his father should continue to work so hard. He sold his business, and became the shop superintendent for the Twin City Printing Company. He owned his home and had accumulated enough money to live comfortably. But he did not want ever to forsake the smell of printer's ink or the clang of the Gordon presses, as strong a lure to the printer as the odor of the sawdust and the clop of horses' hoofs, to the circus performer. He meant to go on working until his time on earth had ended. But there came a day when the owner of the business decided that he could reduce expenses by putting a younger man in charge of the shop. Dad Fraley was more than 60. It was time for him to retire. "Too old to work any longer, you ought to take things easier," said the proprietor, words that begin to haunt all men and women who have passed 50, and words that many thousands heard during the Depression. So they were spoken to Dad 7 years ago in the front office of the Twin City Printing Company, and he left that night, branded too old to work. But there was something different between Dad Fraley and the majority of men who faced the same problem. He didn't agree that he was too old, and he didn't intend to take things easy. He knew that the quickest way for him to die would be to sit around doing nothing. That night there occurred a directors' meeting in the Fraley homestead. Mr. and Mrs. Frank L. Fraley were the members present. "I'm going to start a little shop of my own right here in this house," said the president of the corporation. "I'll buy some type, a press, a cutter, and the other things I need. There are a lot of folks in these 2 towns who know my work and like it. They'll be glad to give me as many jobs as I can handle." Now down in the basement. But that was when the meeting got warm. No woman wants a printing plant in her basement, too much noise and confusion. So they finally compromised on the little 1-car garage, which up to that moment had done nothing more eventful than house several cars made and sold by another elderly man who seems destined to keep on working, Henry Ford. And in that brick garage, no bigger than a tourist's cabin, Dad Fraley established a new business, one with very little overhead and soon quite profitable. It was only a year or so until every inch of floor space was crowded with the tools and machinery of the master printer. The news got around somehow that Dad was still turning out superior printing, and he has never had a dull minute, or had to solicit a single job. With only a young man to kick the press, and a girl occasionally for bindery work, this man who was too old to work any longer has often averaged $100 a week clear profit in his little brick printing shop. Why? Well, perhaps, Dad himself has explained the secret of his success by quoting from Emerson on one of his folders: "If a man write a better book, preach a better sermon, or build a better mouse trap than his neighbor, though he build his house in the woods, the world will make a beaten path to his door." Mouse traps or printing, it is all the same. The man who has achieved distinction in any kind of craftsmanship, who is still strong in body and young in spirit, need not fear the specter of old age. Be a freelance photographer. Big money can be made taking human interest photographs. That has been proved by Lee Clark, who has averaged $15 daily by snapping his camera around Chicago during the past several months. Clark started shooting human interest photographs when he entered a contest conducted by an out-of-town newspaper. The paper promised to pay $5 for each photograph published. Clark decided he could pay for a camera with money accruing to him from photographing unusual subjects for the contest, and bought a second-hand camera for which he paid $73. Included were 2 packs of films. He made close-up photographs of points of interest in and around Chicago, which he mailed to the newspaper. A week later he received a check for $80 in payment for 16 of the 24 pictures. He did not win the prize, but in the next 3 weeks received checks totaling $270 for photographs from newspaper syndicates and advertising agencies. That, you will agree, was mighty good money. Many photographs are not saleable, Clark pointed out, because they have poor composition, or lack human interest. You can take a photograph one way, and it doesn't mean anything. Take the photograph from a sharp angle, however, and it stands out. Photographs of kittens, puppies, babies and prominent people sell best. Snap a good photograph of a small kitten poking its head above the rim of a shoe, and you have something that will bring $5 or more from a newspaper syndicate. I put 3 little brown, curly-haired puppies in a wire paper basket, took a fast close-up of them, and got $20 for it from a New York advertising agency. They used it to advertise dog food. Because developing and printing negatives and prints has a great deal to do with the salability of a photograph, Clark has it done by professionals who know best how to get results. It costs him 20 cents to have a film pack developed, and he pays 5 cents for each print. Not every photograph he takes sells, of course, but his average is about 1 in 9. He takes between 35 and 40 photographs every day, and his costs, including films, printing and developing, run close to $6 daily. You can readily discover the best angle from which to take a photograph by studying the subject through the camera ground glass. The image shown in the ground glass is exactly the same as that which will appear in the finished photograph. Making camera studies in spare time will prove lucrative and enjoyable. Newspaper syndicates, magazine publishers, advertising agencies, big corporations, department stores, dress shops, men's stores, and schools furnish a ready market for the proper type of photograph. Striking photographs are hard to find, but there are many opportunities for snapping them right in your own community. If you have good camera sense and develop the necessary skill, you will find a good market for out-of-the-ordinary photographs among companies which produce calendars for syndicating the retail stores, such as the Gerlach-Barklow Company of Joliet, or Brown and Bigelow of St. Paul. There are men like John Cobble, of Dayton, who earn upward of $10,000 a year just traveling about taking calendar photographs. Can you imagine any business more pleasant? Selling sales information. In every city there are usually 4 or 5 dealers in various household products. There is an electrical dealer who sells washing machines and similar devices. There is usually a utility company selling gas stoves. There is a store which sells radios. Another sells oil burners. And in the last year stores are being established to sell air conditioning equipment. All of these businessmen work on leads, that is to say they need to know the names of people in town who are contemplating buying equipment such as they sell, so that they can call on these prospects and interest them in their particular appliances. To get leads by a door-to-door canvas is expensive. It costs a lot of money, and takes too many salesmen, although it is being done. If these dealers can be shown how they could get such leads for less money, so that they could keep all their salesmen busy calling on known prospects, they would jump at the opportunity. An advertising man who was out of work figured that by making a personal canvas of every house in town, he could find out from one call what these 5 dealers make 5 calls to learn, thus meeting the first requirement of a successful business, rendering a definite and needed service. So he had some blanks printed, on which he listed various questions designed to secure from the housewife such information as: 1. Do you use a vacuum cleaner? 2. How old is it? 3. When will you be ready to trade your present vacuum cleaner for a new one? 4. What make of vacuum cleaner will you probably buy? He headed up these blanks with the imposing title, Rockford Home Equipment Survey, and introduced himself in the following manner. My name is Stom. I am making a survey of household appliances being used in Rockford homes for an article in the Rockford Star and Register. He previously had approached the publisher of the newspaper, who said he would be glad to publish the summary of his investigations in his news columns. It helped his advertisers. Would you be good enough to answer a few questions about the gas and electrical appliances which you are using in your home? Next he went to the leading dealers, showed them the sort of information he was obtaining as a result of his calls, and asked them if they would be willing to pay him 25C for every lead he obtained for equipment such as they were selling. He admitted frankly that some of the leads would be names of people with whom the dealer was already in contact, but demonstrated that there would be such a small percentage of these that it would not represent much of a waste. In many such cases he obtained data that the dealer did not have, but which were helpful to him, such as, for example, the homeowner's preference for equipment sold by his competitor. This proposition, of course, was made to only one dealer in each line of business, first come first served. In nearly every case where Stom called he got a lead for at least one of his clients, and in many cases for all 5. He found he was able to canvass about 40 homeowners in a day, working evenings as well as during the daytime. Since it was all profit, except for the cost of printing up the questionnaires, you can figure out how long it took him to make $1,000. This same idea, in a slightly different form, was used by the Women's Guild of St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Evanston, Ill, to raise funds for the church budget. Each woman in the church was given a page from the Evanston telephone directory, and required to call up these names within a month. She was furnished with blanks printed for the purpose. In this case, however, a wide range of needs was covered by the survey, including automobiles, tires, radios, water heaters, incinerators, etc. Hundreds of dollars were raised as a result of the plan. Making money with a portable duplicator. When Mildred Connery graduated from business college, she intended to start out on a secretarial career. She soon discovered it was impossible to find a job, so she became a public stenographer. Business didn't rush into her office, though, and there were days when she had no work to do. The way to get business is to go after it, thought Mildred. But how am I to go after it? She considered various ways, and tried a few without success. She left cards in offices. She called on businessmen in the building where she rented space. But her business didn't increase. One day a small boy entered her office with a magazine in his hand. Holding the magazine out to her, he said, 10 cents. She paid him, saying she wished she could make sales as quickly as he did. All you have to do is show the thing you're selling, and name the price, said the boy. That boy didn't know it, but he gave me an idea, declared Mildred. I thought if I could find some way to show the kind of work I did for people, I could make money. Up to that time I had practically no stencil business. I knew small businessmen were using form letters, and got them somewhere. Later I recalled using a portable duplicating machine in school, and I decided to get one, carry it from office to office, and leave a sample of the kind of work it did in each office I visited. The success of this plan was immediate. Mildred did not say a word to anyone when she entered an office. She opened the duplicator, ran off a sample letter, handed it to the businessman, and smiling, waited for him to remark about it. This sample letter was illustrated with a tracing of a girl's head, and read, "This is a sample of the duplicating work I will do for you. Note the perfect typewriter ribbon match. You can fill in the names and addresses on these letters on your typewriter if you wish. Glance over the following low prices, and give me a trial order." Detailed list of prices followed. Her entire investment, including the portable duplicator and other incidentals, was $30. Mildred secured 18 small orders the first day and her net profit was $60 for the week. The demonstration required but a few seconds, since this machine is ready to operate the moment it is opened. The sample letter was short enough to be read quickly, and the prices quoted were reasonable. In addition, the illustration, which was a tracing from a magazine drawing, gave the businessman an idea of the possible uses for this type of letter. Anyone securing one of those portable duplicators can build a good income in the same way Mildred did if the business is there. Small business concerns, lawyers, sales agents and real estate men are the best prospects since they regularly use small quantities of letters and price lists. Restaurants and drugstores with lunch counters often have several menus run off for circulation in the vicinity of their stores. As many as 3,000 copies may be run off from one stencil. Hunting rare coins. A newspaper story about a woman who sold a $50 to a coin collector for $400 prompted W.F. Williams to devote his spare time to a search for rare coins. He got a list of wanted pennies, nickels, quarters, and $50 and memorized the dates and mint marks of all coins for which big premiums were offered. Each night he examined every small coin he had received during the day when changing paper money in restaurants, cigar stores, and gasoline stations, and this spare time effort paid handsome profits. Williams declares that many coins are worth more than 1,000 times their face value, and that there are thousands of wanted American coins circulating throughout the country every day, their value unknown to their owners. The first coin I sold was a 1913 Liberty Head nickel. This brought me $50 and encouraged me to search for other rare coins, said Williams. From a streetcar conductor a few days later, he received an American half-dime and change, a silver piece minted in 1808. That conductor believed he was giving me a dime when he handed me that small silver piece. I was glad to get it, however, for I sold it a few days later for $30. One day, about a week later, I was stepping up to pay my check in a lunchroom. The man ahead of me was arguing with the cashier about a coin handed out in change for a dollar bill. It was a $50 minted in 1858, and the cashier said it was good as any. "I'll take it," I said breathlessly. I got $165 for it 2 weeks later. Williams didn't get all of his rare coins that way. He purchased some at nominal prices from friends and neighbors, and resold them at a handsome profit. A friend of his dug up an old tin can in his backyard which contained among other coins, 7 dimes dated 1894, and knowing Williams was searching for 1894 dimes, he brought them all over to Williams. Williams carefully examined them, selected one, and offered $1 for it. His friend sold it willingly. "You see," Williams explained, "he thought all those dimes had the same value. The one I selected was the only one of the 7, however, that was worth more than 10 cents. That coin had an mint mark on it which made it valuable." A little later I was paid $100 for it. Among the American coins for which premiums are offered are, half-cent piece, dated 1796 for which up to $75 is offered, a 1-cent piece dated 1799 commands up to $80, up to $150 will be paid for an 1802 half-dime, up to $300 for an 1827 quarter-dollar, up to $500 for an 1838 half-dollar New Orleans mint, marked with an O between bust and date, up to $250 for an 1853 half-dollar, up to $2,500 for an 1804 silver dollar, up to $250 for an 1885 trade dollar, up to $250 for an 1863 S mint $2.50 gold piece, up to $500 for a gold dollar, North Carolina, letter C below the wreath, up to $1,000 for an 1878 $3 gold piece, and up to $5,000 for an 1822 U.S. $5 gold piece. Hundreds of other coins are listed at values ranging between $15 and $70. Anyone may turn his spare time into a profitable search for wanted American coins. A complete list of wanted coins may be obtained from a reliable coin collector. These lists show the dates, marks, and other specifications which will enable you to identify wanted coins, and the prices collectors will pay for them. By examining them through a magnifying glass, which you may buy at any novelty store for 25 or 50 cents, coins worn smooth by handling, special mint letters and marks become clear which cannot be detected with the naked eye. When a rare coin comes into your possession, mail it to a coin dealer, and he will send you his check promptly. Be sure that the coin collector is reliable and can show references for fair dealing. There are a lot of fakers among coin dealers just as there are among stamp dealers. A handy shop in your home. Mrs. Lindstrom, of Wilmette, Illinois, has always been a very energetic and busy woman. When her husband's business, which was sanding and refinishing floors, began to slip, she decided to give a lift and add to the family income. Her forte was sewing, so she conceived the idea of starting a handy shop right in her own home. She inserted a small advertisement in the local paper announcing that the handy shop was ready to mend, quilt, make over clothes, and in general do any of the little odd jobs that so many women neglect, just because they don't like to do them. Not long after the advertisement appeared, many small repair jobs started coming in. Then later, as her reputation grew, not only repair jobs but orders for work on new materials were received. Soon the business outgrew the corner in the dining room of their big old-fashioned house, and it has been necessary to turn the whole dining room with its cheerful bay window into a workshop that fairly hums with activity from early morning hours until late at night. Shelves for storage and wardrobe space for hanging finished garments line the walls. Mrs. Lindstrom soon outgrew the repair and overhauling jobs, and for the past 4 years has been busily engaged in making drapes, fine satin comforters, applique and patchwork quilts, as well as regular dressmaking. Lately she has had to hire extra help to meet her delivery dates. For some time the handy shop was the sole support of the entire family of 6, her husband's business having just gradually died out. The husband is now employed in another line of work, her 2 grown sons are also employed, and the daughters are off to school, but the shop hums on busier than ever. This idea has always been a pet dream of Mrs. Lindstrom's, but it took a real need to develop it. Today she counts among her clientele some of Chicago's best North Shore families. When you ask her if she is going to retire, since the family is now able to get along without her help, she quickly answers, "Oh no. This is my business, and I intend to carry on full steam just so long as the orders come in." So far each year has shown a substantial gain in profits over the previous year. A country store on wheels. Instead of sitting in their Crossroads country store waiting for business to pick up, Rhea and Moore, storekeepers near Logansport, Indiana, went out after their customers. They built a body, lined with shelving, on their old truck and started out to sell the farmers. A sufficient stock of groceries is put in the truck for a day's trade. 4½ days each week this traveling store is on the road covering a 7-mile radius. About 200 farmhouses are visited. When the truck drives into the dooryard, a flight of steps is put down and the housewife steps up into the store. Here she can select the groceries she needs, paying in cash or eggs. In addition to saving the farmer's wife the trip to town to buy her necessities, it saves her the trip to market her eggs. The overhead is not more than $1.25 a day for gas and oil as the truck travels only about 15 miles a day. The cost of building the new body on the old truck ran about $65, but as the first 4 months of the experiment quadrupled their business, Rhea and Moore feel that it was a good investment. A combination business place and residence. The owner lives in a cozy apartment upstairs in the coffee pot. The spout is used for a clothes closet or storage space. This unique hot dog stand located near Oakland, California, does a land office business. Its cleanliness and inviting appearance have much to do with its trade-getting powers. It is 8½ feet long. Pennyweight scales lure pennies. How much do you weigh? When that question was asked Harry Larson in a drugstore, back in 1933, he looked around for a scale. He dropped a penny in the slot of the coin-operated machine. A moment later he stepped off and sauntered over to the counter to buy a package of cigarettes. As he stood at the cigar counter 7 others stepped up and weighed themselves. Curious, Harry asked the druggist how much money the scale made each month. He told me that it averaged about $20 a month, but that he didn't own the machine. An operator had placed it there and his cut was 25% of the amount taken from the machine each month. The scale itself was a beauty. I could see that people were attracted to it because of its appearance, and that they wondered what it cost. I noted the name of the manufacturer and wrote for full details about becoming an operator. That was how I got started in the scale business. I bought 70 machines altogether. The first 3 I paid for out of my savings. The other 67 were paid for out of the pennies taken from the first 3. These first 3 machines cost me $175 and paid me a profit every month of $98. That was a pretty good return on the investment. I figured there is no servicing needed for these machines and nothing to adjust. You just pick a good location, set them up, and there they are all ready to lure pennies from the curious. It's a clean, simple proposition, and you can't hit upon a surer or better way of making money easily. After buying the first 3 scales, I established a line of credit with the manufacturer, and got 5 more on the time payment plan. The machines vary a little in their monthly earnings. The first 3 locations average $33 each, the next 3 run $19.85 each, and there are 2 that pay under $17 monthly. My monthly income for the 70 machines amounts to $768, a little better than $10 each. In 9 months, I've earned enough to pay for the scales, and made a good living besides. The stores where my machines are placed, are usually drug, candy, and grocery stores. I've found that a live grocery and meat market, where a number of women shop every day, is as good a location as you can get. Women are always worried about their weight. They want to know whether they've gained or lost, and to make sure, like to weigh themselves on the same scale all the time. Since they make a practice of doing most of their shopping for meat and groceries in a neighborhood store, they patronize the penny scale set up there. There are several manufacturers of coin-operated scales. They all furnish detailed plans to help you interest merchants in keeping your scales in the front of the store, or in a spot near the cash register, where people standing around to be served may step on the scale. These instructions make it easy for anyone who is a hustler, and can make a convincing sales talk, to be successful from the start. A shrimp fisherwoman. After the real estate bubble burst in Florida, Sadie Miller, like many others, was broke. In looking around for ways and means of getting back on her feet, she discovered shrimping. When she first opened her shrimp dock, she had a man running it, but after he failed to come back from a vacation up north, she decided to manage it herself. Shrimping is hard work for anyone, but particularly hard for a woman. During the busy season, the work goes on night and day. In rubber overalls and hip boots, Sadie Miller and her helpers search for the elusive shrimp so much in demand as bait by fishermen. As shrimps vary their habitat from day to day, they must be hunted. Small or large, the size matters little. The fisherman just wants fresh live bait. Because they are harder to find in winter, they are worth more. In January, February, and March, when they are scarce, they bring 50 or 75 cents a dozen. In summer, the price runs as low as 25 cents a hundred. However, Sadie Miller never sells her catch for less than $1 a hundred. From a small start, this business has grown to the point where a number of helpers are needed during the busy season. While shrimping hasn't made Sadie Miller wealthy by any means, she has made several times $1,000 at it. Specializing in social printing. Many a successful publisher or printer today started his career with an old Kelsey printing press in his basement. There is an old saying that once you get printer's ink in your system you can never get it out. Frank Doubleday, Don Sietz, Tim Thrift, Joe Mitchell, and Rudyard Kipling are just a few of the many who began their careers putting in their spare time kicking a printing press. Today, with the used printing press, there is still an opportunity, not only to make money, but to get a start toward a fascinating career in one of the three allied fields: publishing, advertising, or writing. Several years ago, a young chap, who was a clerk in the offices of a large Chicago packing plant, started an agency for the sale of social stationery. He secured samples and a price list from a local engraver. It happened to be near graduation time, so he called at the schools nearby and secured orders from the students for their first engraved cards, which they needed to enclose with their graduation invitations. When the orders were ready to pack, he placed a sticker in the bottom of each box giving the registration number for the copper plate from which the cards were made, his name and address, and a form for reordering when the present supply was used. His success with these cards encouraged him to look around for further business. By watching the neighborhood newspaper, he learned of many engagements and coming marriages. He noted the addresses, immediately called on the mothers of the brides-to-be and solicited orders for wedding announcements and calling cards. Between working out ideas of his own and making use of the sales suggestions the engraver gave him, he managed to build up a rather nice little business. During this time he continued with his regular job, and handled the engraving agency at night and on Saturday afternoons. At this time he decided that a small printing press might be of help to him, so he purchased a used press on the time payment plan, installed it in the rear of a store and began to look around for printing orders. He found that professional men were particularly good prospects as they were likely to put off ordering their supplies until the last moment. They were glad to be able to get prompt service in a hurry, and soon he had developed a good business among professional men for bill heads, letterheads and envelopes. Before long, his space proved to be too small, so he selected a larger office in a modern building at a nominal rental. Here he established himself as the Society Specialty Shop. About this time the reorders were beginning to come in for calling cards, and he was also receiving orders for Christmas cards. In order to get repeat business wherever possible, he made every effort to sell his customers on the idea of leaving their copper plates with him under a registered number. His sales argument was built around the importance of having the plate kept in perfect condition so that there would be no scratches or dents to mar the engraved work later. When his competitors found that he had built up a good-sized file of registered plates, he began receiving offers for his business, including the file of plates, monogram dies, etc. An opportunity came along at this time for him to better his regular position, so he accepted the best offer of the lot and sold his establishment for $1,500. Servicing beer coils, a new industry. The return of legal beer opened taverns in almost every state. While in one such tavern, Jimmy Coyle heard the bartender curse under his breath. "What's the matter?" Jimmy asked. "This blasted Coyle is giving trouble again." The coil cleaner fellow who ought to service it hasn't been around for several weeks. Jimmy wondered at that. Later, he investigated and found out that the coils in every tavern should be cleaned thoroughly every few days, and that bartenders and tavern owners were glad to pay a regular service fee for this type of service. So he got in touch with the manufacturer of a coil cleaner and established himself in a business of his own, servicing the beer coils in taverns, restaurants, lunchrooms, hotels, soda fountains, cafes, roadhouses, clubs, and amusement places. As his income from this service is better than $100 a week, it didn't take him long to corral that first $1,000. The beauty of this coil cleaning device, said Jimmy, is that anybody can operate it, and no one needs experience to work it. Yet there's a good income in owning one and working up service accounts. I charge a small fee of $1 for each bar I service, and I am now servicing 112 beer-selling bars. However, I didn't build up this business overnight. No sir. It took a lot of real work to build it, but I figured at the time that no matter what line of business you go into, you've got to work hard or you won't make a nickel. As a matter of fact, there was practically no one servicing these bars when I started. Naturally, the coils were in bad shape, and it took longer to do each job. The fellow in town who had been servicing them was too busy to take care of all the business. When I started, he called me up and gave me some of his customers' names, and told me to be sure and call on them. I did. But the way he had handled their service had left a bad taste in their mouths, and it took me a couple of months to overcome this. Jimmy carries his coil cleaner in a handy case when he makes the rounds of the taverns he services. He simply connects the cleaner to the coil, turns on the little handles, and the machine does the rest. This device, which is operated by electricity, leaves the coils thoroughly cleaned and scoured, without the use of chemicals, acids or steam. It can be carried anywhere, is compact and handy, and can be operated from a light socket in any taproom. The total investment Jimmy made in this equipment was $107. He owned a Roadster at the time he made his purchase, and was therefore ready to make calls in any emergency. The fact that the coils must be cleaned and kept clean to give good tasting beer, makes the beer coil cleaning service a permanent business which can be built up as big as you want to make it. This business, in its infancy now, is ideal for anyone anxious to start a business on small capital, with promises of good returns. There is no doubt that once established, any person who gives quick service in this industry will enjoy a good business for many years to come. Jimmy was furnished everything complete by the company when he bought his equipment. Renting tires solves sales problem. When you think of a tire station, you think of a fellow who bought a few hundred tires, procured a license, rented a store and went into business. That was the way that Harold Holt started. His investment in equipment and stock was under $300, but he didn't set the world afire. It wasn't until a friend advised him to learn something about business management, that he began to realize the reason he was not making enough to cover expenses was because of his inexperience. So he inquired about a business management course and enrolled with a well-rated correspondence school. After he had been studying for 3 months, he began to change things. He completed the course in 18 months, but long before that, he had placed his business on a sound, profitable basis, and was well on his way to his second $1,000. At first I had the notion that all the business management course would teach me was bookkeeping methods, and other things like that, which would produce no revenue. My bookkeeping didn't have to be systematized. What I really needed was ideas for creating new business, and holding the business I had. I was surprised, early in the course, to discover that many of my lessons were devoted to exactly the type of business building ideas I needed. There was one example cited, showing how a man had taken an idea, worked it into his business and, finally, made a lot of money. That was the Hertz Drive It Yourself idea, and I got to thinking it over. I decided to try a similar one, applying the principle to auto tires. I figured out the wholesale cost of a tire, and the number of days it would take to pay for one on the rent-a-tire principle. I was surprised at the amount of profit there would be in it. But I had no conviction that any man would want to rent an auto tire. It might be good advertising, I thought, and put up a sign, offering to rent motorists a new tire for 25 cents a day. The next morning, 2 men came in and rented 4 tires each for their cars. I took their license numbers, and changed the tires. They said they needed new tires, but hadn't money to buy them yet, and I assured them that half the rental would apply to the purchase of new tires. This pleased them. When they went out, I decided I should have collected a minimum charge for daily rentals, but didn't. Later that day, I rented 6 more tires, made a minimum charge of 75 cents for changing tires and 50 cents for 2 days rental. That gave me a little guarantee on the tires, and cut the probable risk down a great deal. I learned before the week was out, however, that there was no risk. Of the 26 tires I had rented that week, 24 were bought by the renters. The other 2 were returned, and the full rental fee paid. I was surprised, moreover, to discover that in a short period, I had doubled my tire sales to non-renters, many new customers being attracted to my store by the sign. Business management training certainly is of great value, and materially helps not only to reduce expenses, but to keep you from making dangerous decisions due to lack of experience. Such courses of instruction vary greatly in price. All of them, however, are available on deferred payment of a few dollars a month. 52 Money-Making Ideas for Women. One versatile woman, who has done part-time work for over 8 years, claims that any woman can make money in her spare time if she is really willing to work, will not scorn the smallest sort of job, and is prompt and dependable. She emphasizes the importance of letting everybody in the community in which you live know that you are available for all the varieties of work you can do. Visit every place of business that you might serve, do not ask for work, but leave your name and address, with telephone number, and suggest that in an emergency they might be glad to know that you would work for them. Ask the president of the Women's Club, the church societies, and other organizations to announce that you are available. Contact the doctors and the Red Cross nurse and the local Red Cross head. Ask other women, who are doing what you are doing, to pass opportunities on to you when they are too busy to accept the work. In turn, you must remember to pass work on to them whenever possible. Have a telephone number, even if you have to pay a neighbor to take calls for you. Many a hurry-up job has been lost because a woman could not be reached by telephone. Don't refuse small jobs if it is only for 1 hour's work, take it. Many such short periods of work add up at the end of a month. The best way to discover how you can make money in your spare time is to make a list of the things you can do. When you start to make this list, you will be surprised at the number of accomplishments you have acquired through the years. The following list contains a number of activities that most women can follow. In fact, you may be able to handle a half dozen or more of these jobs without the difficulty of their conflicting one with the other. Book review groups. Any woman who is well read will find an enjoyable and profitable diversion in getting a group of 15 to 20 women to organize a reading club, and let her review current books. A club of this type meets at the different homes about once a week, and a nominal membership fee is charged from which the reviewer is compensated. One such reading club in the Chicago suburban area has 30 members who pay $10 for a series of 12 lectures or reviews. In this case, the woman who does the reviewing arranges with a local woman to call up friends and get them to join the club. In return for her trouble, her dues are cancelled. Shop for out or town customers. The professional shopper in the small town saves time and railroad fares for her customers. She need not charge them a fee because the shopper's discount given by city stores runs as high as 10 or 15%. The shopper who makes a weekly trip to the city may earn as much, anywhere from $15 to $40 for the trip, and even more. Deliver books for a circulating library. A library can increase its circulation by delivering books to customers. If you have a car, you can make 2 or 3 trips a day. By making deliveries for several shops at one time, you can increase the amount of your earnings. Teach ballroom dancing to a group of men and women, also children. Small classes can be taught in your own home. The radio or phonograph records will provide the music. If there is no large academy in your town, you may be successful in starting such a school. The admission fee may be paid at the door, or season tickets may be sold. Include a refreshment bar. This can be leased to someone, and get as good an orchestra as you can afford. Tell fortunes. Tea rooms have found today that the addition of a fortune teller has stimulated business. The fortunes may be told with cards, the palm, or a crystal. Astrology is also popular. If you are a fair judge of human nature, you can become rather adept. There are any number of books on fortune-telling methods, and a little application is all that is needed. This is also a lucrative business at summer and winter resorts. Sing in a church choir. Many churches pay for this service. Naturally, you must have a fair voice. Wait on tables. Tea rooms which serve only luncheons and dinners need extra help during the rush hours. Caterers, hotel restaurants, and inns also employ extra help. Leave your name and telephone number with the managers of these places. Teach bridge. Many a woman who is an expert bridge player has found, when the family income started to decline, a way to make a good income. Bridge may be taught in private lessons. The charge is usually higher, or in groups. If the group meets at your home, 25 cents an hour for each person is a reasonable charge. Take complete charge of a home during illness. When a mother is in a hospital or convalescing at home, and no child is old enough to assume responsibility, someone is needed to take care of the household and the children. Often this is an emergency job and pays well. Counselor for a girls' camp. If you like children and can handle them easily, this work offers not only an income but a pleasant summer. If you have a car, arrange to drive 4 or 5 neighbors to work each morning and pick them up in the evening. Give instructions in driving. A course of lessons should bring you about $1 or $1.50. Take a group of children to and from school. Leave your name and number with the local hotels and travel agencies and offer your services to tourists who want to see the town. If there is a summer resort nearby, meet the trains or boats and drive visitors to their hotels. Mend linens and fine laces. With a little practice you can become an expert in this work. One of the best ways to mend linens is to weave linen threads in the worn or torn places. These may be secured from the inside of the hems. Laces are more difficult. However, there are books on laces which will give you this instruction. Launder curtains and fine linens. Most women are fussy about their curtains and fine linens and dislike turning them over to the average laundry. By doing excellent work, it is a simple matter to establish a reputation in this field. In larger cities, where it is smoky and dusty, contract to launder the curtains a certain number of times a year for a stipulated sum to be paid each time the curtains are laundered. Teach golf. Many women play a good game of golf but have never tried to teach it. There are always men and women interested in learning how to play the game. The charge varies from $2 to $4.50 an hour. Organize a course 1x Public Speaking. Build your class around the idea that training in public speaking develops poise and diction. Women who belong to clubs and many businessmen can be sold on this idea. If you were good as a debater in school, you can probably handle such classes. Study the books that have been published on public speaking. Coach backward students during their vacations. If you have done any teaching, or if you have kept up with school work by helping your children with their lessons, you can qualify for this work. Board children in your home during the summer. If your home is spacious and in the country or at the seashore, you can handle a few children as summer boarders. A comfortable, modern farm, where the children will get exercise and good food is an ideal place.